Rap has always had beef. That's nothing new. But every once in a while, a situation comes along that stops being about music and starts being about survival. Today, we're going through the most deadly wars rap has ever seen. And I'm not talking about diss tracks. I'm talking about bodies. I'm talking about blocks that changed forever. I'm talking about some of the most talented people this culture ever produced, gone, because of what went down in the streets behind the scenes. We got Chicago. We got LA. We got situations that most people only know half the story on. And today we're filling in the gaps. No glorifying, no cap, just the real story start to finish. And fam, we starting in Los Angeles. Because before we get to anything else, we gotta talk about one of the most painful and controversial wars in Crip history. A war that a lot of people believe cost us one of the greatest to ever do it. We talking Nipsey Hussle, we talking Big U, and we talking about what really went on in those rolling 60s streets on Slauson Avenue. Let's get into it. Picture this, two rolling 60s Crips from the same block in South Central LA. One's an old school OG who built his empire through fear and violence. The other's a young visionary trying to lift his community through business and music. They start as mentor and student, father and son. But by 2019, they're locked in a deadly war that would end with one of hip-hop's brightest stars gunned down in broad daylight. This ain't just another gang beef story, fam. This is about how Big U, the man who discovered Nipsey Hussle, housed him, fed him, and launched his career, allegedly orchestrated his murder when Nipsey refused to stay under his control. We're talking about a war that split the rolling 60s down the middle, turned brothers into enemies, and according to federal wiretaps, ended with a phone call made 30 minutes before Nipsey died. The streets of Crenshaw became a battlefield where loyalty meant nothing and respect was earned through bloodshed, where a diss track could start a war and a recording studio in a basement became ground zero for hip-hop's most tragic betrayal. This is the story of how Big U's empire crumbled when he couldn't control the monster he created, and how that monster's refusal to bow down cost him his life. By the end of this video, you'll understand why federal investigators are now trying to connect Big U to Nipsey's murder through a RICO case that's shaking LA to its core. You'll hear the evidence that suggests Eric Holder didn't act alone. And you'll learn why a simple phone call might be the smoking gun that finally brings down one of LA's most feared gangsters. So stay locked in, because this war goes deeper than anyone imagined, and the truth is more sinister than any street legend you've ever heard. To understand this war, you gotta understand the players. And there's never been two more different cats from the same hood than Big U and Nipsey Hussle. Eugene Henley Jr., better known as Big U, was already a legend in South Central by the time Nipsey was even born. Standing 6 feet 5 inches with the kind of presence that made grown men step aside, Big U wasn't just another gang member, he was the rolling 60s incarnate, a walking embodiment of everything the set represented. Born in 1966, Big U came up during the crack epidemic when LA's streets were a war zone, and survival meant being more ruthless than the next man. By the early 90s, he'd earned his stripes through violence, intimidation, and an iron will that refused to bend. Gang experts would later describe him as a leader, if not the top man, of the rolling 60s Crips, a position he earned through blood and maintained through fear. But his reign got cut short in December 1991 when the feds caught him in a drug sting operation. They handed him 23 years in federal prison, thinking they'd broken the back of one of LA's most dangerous gang leaders. They were wrong. Prison only made Big U smarter, more calculating, and hungrier for the power he'd lost. While Big U was locked up, learning the game from older convicts and planning his comeback, a young kid named Ermias Joseph Asghedom was growing up just blocks away from where Big U used to run things. Born August 15, 1985, Ermias was different from the jump. Smart, ambitious, with a natural charisma that drew people to him like a magnet, but the streets still called to him. At 14, he made the decision that would change his life forever. He joined the rolling 60s neighborhood Crips and took the name Nipsey Hussle, a play on comedian Nipsey Russell's name. It was a choice that would eventually put him on a collision course with the most dangerous man in his neighborhood. When Big U walked out of federal prison in 2004 after serving 13 years, the streets had changed. The crack game was played out, the feds were watching everything, and smart gangsters were looking for new ways to make money. Big U had learned something crucial during his time inside. The real money wasn't in drugs anymore. It was in entertainment. He immediately got back in the game, this time focusing on the music industry. He started managing Kurupt, one of the West Coast's most respected rappers, and built connections with Suge Knight at Death Row Records. Big U understood that music was just another hustle, and he was determined to be the puppet master pulling the strings. The meeting between Big U and Nipsey Hussle in 2006 was like destiny calling. Nipsey was a young, hungry rapper trying to make it out the hood, grinding every day but lacking the connections to take his career to the next level. Big U was an OG with industry connections looking for the next big thing, someone he could mold and control. "I seen greatness, to be honest," Big U would later say about meeting Nipsey. "You know how somebody can walk in a room and you know they're different? The swag's different." But this wasn't just a business relationship. Big U took Nipsey under his wing like a father takes in a son. He signed Nipsey to his production company, Unique Music. But more than that, he opened his home to him. Nipsey actually lived with Big U's family for a period, recording his first tracks in a studio Big U built in his basement. This was unprecedented in gang culture. OGs don't usually open their homes to young soldiers, don't usually invest their own money in someone else's dreams. But Big U saw something special in Nipsey, something that reminded him of his younger self. That hunger, that ambition, that refusal to accept the limitations the streets tried to impose. Nipsey was actually signed to me, Big U explained years later. He was signed to me for production, but I was also doing a little management too, me and Steve Lobel. Steve Lobel was the white manager Big U brought in to be the front man, someone who could navigate the corporate side of the music industry while Big U handled the streets. It was a smart play that showed Big U understood both worlds and knew how to manipulate them to his advantage. The early days were pure hustle, the kind of grind that builds legends. Big U would take Nipsey on tour in a mobile home, hitting city after city, building a fan base from the ground up one show at a time. "We did that whole tour in a mobile home. We did it in a van," Big U remembered. "The greatness of the hustle came out on that tour. We'd go city to city, and each city he'd pick up more people." Those tours were where Nipsey's legend was born, where he learned how to command a crowd and turn strangers into believers. They'd start shows with Nipsey opening for bigger acts in front of maybe 10 people, performing like his life depended on it, because in many ways it did. But his performance was so electric, so authentic, that by the fifth city, promoters were moving him up the lineup. His show was so good they moved us from being the first opener all the way to him opening up right before Game, Big U recalled, with what seemed like genuine pride. This was more than business for Big U. He genuinely loved Nipsey like a son, saw him as the heir to his empire, the young king who would carry on his legacy. He'd housed him, fed him, invested his own money in launching his career. In gang culture, that kind of loyalty creates bonds that are supposed to last forever. But in the music industry, nothing lasts forever, and success has a way of changing people. By 2009, cracks were starting to show in the relationship. Nipsey was growing as an artist and as a man, developing his own vision for his career and his community. He was starting to question the deal he'd signed with Big U, a 10-year production contract that wouldn't expire until 2019. For a young artist watching his career take off and seeing the money he was generating, that felt like a lifetime of servitude. The first major conflict came over something that might seem small to outsiders but represented everything wrong with their relationship: recording equipment. Big U had studio equipment at his shop that Nipsey had been using to record his music. When their business relationship started souring, Big U decided to reclaim what he saw as his property. "Me and Nipsey had a fallout," Big U later explained with the casual tone of a man discussing the weather. "He had my equipment and I wanted to use my equipment. He got mad because I got my equipment back. So then that's when our conflict started." But for Nipsey, this wasn't about equipment. It was about control, respect, and the fundamental question of who owned his artistic destiny. He felt like Big U was trying to extort him, using the tools of his trade as leverage to keep him in line. In Nipsey's mind, he'd outgrown his mentor and deserved to control his own destiny. The equipment dispute was really about something much deeper. Nipsey was starting to see Big U not as a father figure or mentor, but as another obstacle between him and his dreams. He was watching other artists blow up while he remained locked in a contract that gave Big U control over his music and a significant percentage of his earnings. Big U, on the other hand, felt betrayed. Here was a young man he'd discovered, housed, and launched to stardom who was now trying to cut him out of the profits. In Big U's mind, Nipsey owed him everything: his career, his success, even his life. The idea that Nipsey would try to break free was not just disrespectful, it was unthinkable. The tension simmered for months, with both men too proud to back down. Nipsey continued to build his career and his brand, while Big U watched his control slip away. Something had to give, and when it did, it would change both their lives forever. The breaking point came when Nipsey did something that, in gang culture, was unforgivable. He made a diss track about Big U. In 2010, Nipsey released a mixtape called The Marathon that would prove to be prophetic in more ways than one. Buried in the track list was a song called You Don't Have a Clue that to most listeners sounded like typical rap braggadocio. But to anyone who knew the situation between Nipsey and Big U, it was a declaration of war. The lyrics were surgical in their precision, each bar carefully crafted to cut deep. Came up tough, so I was never looking for a solution from you. F the middleman, don't expect no favors from me, 'cause I wasn't giving no favors. In those bars, Nipsey was telling the world that he didn't need Big U anymore, that he'd never really needed him, that Big U was just a middleman trying to control him, and that any success he'd achieved was through his own talent and hard work, not because of any favors from his former mentor. Nipsey's career, those words cut deeper than any knife. But it wasn't just the personal betrayal that stung, it was the public humiliation. In gang culture, respect is everything, and Nipsey had just disrespected Big U in front of the entire hip-hop world. The song spread through the streets like wildfire. Everyone in the Rolling 60s knew what it meant, knew that Nipsey had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In gang culture, you don't publicly disrespect an OG, especially not one who'd done as much for you as Big U had done for Nipsey. He's supposed to make a diss song about me, Big U said later, his voice carrying the weight of wounded pride and barely contained rage. Well, I ain't no rapper, I'm a scrapper, so we end up having to come talk about that. What Big U meant by come talk about that was what gang members called discipline. And in the Rolling 60s, discipline could mean anything from a beating to something much worse. The diss track had started a war, and Big U was determined to win it. The confrontation that would define their relationship happened at the most iconic intersection in Rolling 60s territory, Crenshaw and Slauson. This wasn't just any street corner, this was the heart of the neighborhood, the place where the set's power was most visible and most absolute. Big U rolled up with some homies, ready to teach Nipsey a lesson about respect that he'd never forget. But Nipsey wasn't the same scared kid who'd lived in Big U's basement. He'd grown into a man, built his own crew, and developed his own power base. He wasn't backing down from anyone, not even the OG who'd made him. According to multiple sources who witnessed the confrontation, Big U tried to get Nipsey to come with him so they could discipline him away from prying eyes. In gang terms, this meant taking him somewhere private where they could beat him down without interference from police or witnesses. But Nipsey's brother, Black Sam, stepped in and told Big U that Nipsey wasn't going anywhere with them. This was a crucial moment. Black Sam was putting himself between his brother and one of the most dangerous men in LA, knowing full well what the consequences might be. Black Sam jumped in front and told Big U that Nipsey wasn't going anywhere with them, one witness recalled. And Big U responded by telling Black Sam to stay out of it, saying that Black Sam was never from 60s and that this is gang business. Big U's response revealed the depth of his anger and his desperation to maintain control. By saying Black Sam was never from 60s, he was trying to delegitimize his right to interfere, to make this about gang hierarchy rather than family loyalty. What happened next depends on who you ask, but everyone agrees it got violent fast. Punches were thrown, and according to some accounts, Big U initially got the better of Nipsey in the fight. The OG's size and experience gave him an advantage, and for a moment it looked like he might succeed in reasserting his dominance. But then Black Sam went back inside and came out with a pistol. The sight of that gun changed everything, escalating a fist fight into something that could have ended with multiple bodies on the ground. The sound of that gunshot echoing through Crenshaw and Slauson was like a declaration of war. Black Sam fired into the air to get Big U off his brother, and within minutes LAPD was on the scene. They saw Black Sam with the gun and opened fire, but miraculously none of their shots hit him. All three men were arrested and taken to the 77th Street Division, but they all bailed out the next morning. The damage, however, was done. The Rolling 60s were now at war with themselves, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. What started as a personal beef between Big U and Nipsey quickly spread throughout the Rolling 60s like a virus. Gang members were forced to choose sides in a conflict that threatened to tear the set apart from the inside. Were you with the OG who'd been holding it down for decades, or the young king who represented the future? The war played out in ways both subtle and obvious, with each side testing the other's resolve and looking for opportunities to gain an advantage. When Nipsey brought YG, a Compton Blood, into 60s territory to film a music video in 2011, Big U saw it as another act of disrespect and defiance. In the early 2000s, having Bloods in Crip territory was still a major violation, something that could get you killed if you didn't have the juice to back it up. But Nipsey was making a statement. He didn't need Big U's permission to move around LA or to collaborate with whoever he wanted. According to sources, Nipsey had to defend his decision by fighting multiple 60s members just to have YG in their hood, but he stood his ground, proving that he was willing to go to war to maintain his independence. The love was reciprocated when YG invited him to Treetop Piru territory to film the I'm a Thug video, further cementing their alliance. These collaborations weren't just about music. They were Nipsey's way of showing that he was building his own network, his own power base that didn't depend on Big U's approval. He was forming alliances outside the traditional gang structure, creating a new model of how an artist could move through LA's complex web of street politics. Big U watched all of this with growing anger and frustration. Every move Nipsey made was a direct challenge to his authority. When DJ Khaled wanted to film a music video with Nipsey in 60s territory, Big U had allegedly lined up DJ Khaled as an extortion target, part of his checking-in operation that forced celebrities to pay tribute before doing business in LA. But Nipsey brought DJ Khaled to the hood without checking in with Big U first, another direct challenge to his authority. According to sources, Big U sent a gang of 60s members to the video shoot to press the issue and reassert his control. Nipsey frontlined and stood his ground, but the overwhelming pressure and the threat of violence forced him to move the shoot to a parking structure in Inglewood. He also had to beef up security because he was receiving death threats, allegedly from multiple sources who saw his defiance as a threat to the established order. This incident would prove to be the final straw for Big U. Nipsey had publicly embarrassed him again, shown the world that his authority could be challenged and his will could be defied. In Big U's mind, there was only one way to restore his reputation and send a message to anyone else who might think about crossing him. March 31st, 2019 started like any other day for Nipsey Hussle. He was at his Marathon clothing store on Crenshaw, the same intersection where he'd fought Big U years earlier. He was talking with friends, handling business, living his life as a successful entrepreneur and community leader. He had no idea that his former mentor had allegedly already put a price on his head. But according to explosive testimony that would later emerge, someone did know what was about to happen. That someone was Loose Cannon, a Rolling 60s member who'd been working as an enforcer for Big U, carrying out robberies and extortion schemes on his behalf. In what might be the most damning piece of evidence against Big U, Loose Cannon later claimed that he received a phone call from Big U approximately 30 minutes before Nipsey was killed. In that call, Big U allegedly told Loose Cannon that Nipsey just got killed. The timing of this call is crucial to understanding what allegedly happened. If Loose Cannon's testimony is accurate, it suggests that Big U had advanced knowledge of the hit and was expecting it to have already been carried out. The fact that he called 30 minutes early suggests either poor communication with the actual shooter or a miscalculation about when the murder would take place. Confused by the call and the premature announcement of Nipsey's death, Loose Cannon immediately hung up and called Nipsey directly. To his shock and relief, Nipsey answered the phone, very much alive and unaware of any danger. "I called Nipsey and I'm like, 'Nipsey, what's up?' Loose Cannon later testified. He was like, 'Oh, what's up with it?' Nipsey answered. He answered the phone, and I was like, 'Yeah, I love you cuz,' or whatever like that. 'I see you later,' or whatever. So I hung up the phone. I thought, Big U gave wrong information." This conversation would haunt Loose Cannon for years. He'd spoken to Nipsey, heard his voice, could have warned him about the danger he was in. But he didn't, either because he didn't fully understand what was happening or because he was too deep in Big U's organization to risk exposing the plot. 30 minutes later, Loose Cannon's phone started blowing up with calls telling him that Nipsey had indeed been killed. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence, too precise to be explained away as street rumors or lucky guessing. According to Loose Cannon's later testimony, Big U had called him thinking the job was already done, not knowing that the hit was still 30 minutes away. It was a mistake that would eventually come back to haunt him when federal investigators started piecing together the timeline of events surrounding Nipsey's murder. At approximately 3:20 p.m. on March 31st, 2019, Eric Holder approached Nipsey Hussle and 3 other men standing in front of the Marathon clothing store. According to LAPD, Holder had been there earlier, engaging the group in conversation before leaving and returning with a handgun. The conversation that preceded the shooting has been the subject of much speculation and investigation. The official story is that Nipsey called Holder a snitch, leading to the fatal confrontation. But many people, including those close to Nipsey, believe there was more to it than a spontaneous argument about snitching. Surveillance video from an adjacent business captured the moment that changed hip-hop forever. Holder opens fire, and Nipsey and another man fall to the ground as the others run from the gunfire. Nipsey was struck multiple times and died at the scene, his blood staining the same concrete where he'd once fought Big U for his independence. The murder sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and beyond. Nipsey wasn't just another rapper who'd been killed in gang violence. Eric Holder was eventually caught, tried, and convicted for the murder. The prosecution painted him as a lone wolf, a mentally unstable gang member who killed Nipsey in a fit of rage after being called a snitch. But the defense and many observers noted inconsistencies in this narrative. For one thing, Holder's behavior after the shooting didn't match that of someone who'd committed a crime of passion. He fled the scene in a getaway car driven by a woman who later testified that she had no idea what Holder was planning. He then went into hiding for several days before being captured, suggesting a level of premeditation that contradicted the spontaneous nature of the alleged motive. More troubling were the connections between Holder and Big U's organization. Holder was a known associate of several Rolling 60s members who were loyal to Big U. He'd been seen at events and locations connected to Big U's operation, and according to some sources, he'd been struggling financially in the months before the murder. Nipsey's brother, Black Sam, has never accepted the official narrative. In a recent interview, he suggested that Eric Holder didn't act alone. For me, he felt he was supposed to do a job or somebody sent him or whatever. It just don't make no sense. It's not random. You know, it's going to come to the light. For years, the theory that Big U was involved in Nipsey's murder remained just that, a theory whispered in barbershops and debated on social media. But in 2025, everything changed when federal investigators dropped a bombshell RICO indictment against Big U and 18 other members of the Rolling 60s Crips. The 107-page criminal complaint painted a picture of Big U as the leader of a mafia-like criminal enterprise that engaged in murder, extortion, robbery, and fraud. The document detailed years of criminal activity, from dispensary robberies to celebrity extortion schemes, all orchestrated by Big U from his position as an alleged community activist. But buried in those pages were hints that investigators were looking at connections between Big U and Nipsey's murder. The indictment referenced wiretapped conversations where Big U allegedly made statements about high-profile murders in the hip-hop community, suggesting he had knowledge of or involvement in killings that went beyond what was publicly known. According to the indictment, federal agents had been wiretapping Big U's phone conversations for years, using sophisticated surveillance techniques to build their case. They'd planted listening devices in locations he frequented, monitored his financial transactions, and tracked his movements through cell phone data. The investigation revealed that Big U had been using his nonprofit organization, Developing Options, as a front for his criminal activities. The same organization that was supposed to be helping kids in the community was allegedly being used to launder money, coordinate criminal activities, and provide cover for Big U's continued involvement in gang operations. Federal prosecutors described Big U's operation as a sophisticated criminal enterprise that used violence and intimidation to control territory and generate revenue. They alleged that he'd been extorting celebrities, robbing businesses, and ordering hits on rivals while maintaining a public image as a reformed gang member and community leader. The indictment also revealed the extent of Big U's surveillance operation. He'd allegedly been monitoring the activities of rivals and former associates, using informants and electronic surveillance to stay ahead of law enforcement and eliminate threats to his organization. As federal investigators dug deeper into Big U's activities, a pattern emerged that painted a picture of a man who'd never really left the streets, despite his public claims of reformation. The evidence against him was extensive and damning, built over years of patient surveillance and investigation. The wiretapped phone conversations were perhaps the most damaging evidence. In recorded calls from December 2022 and January 2023, Big U allegedly made statements that revealed his true mindset and his willingness to use violence to maintain control. In one conversation, he allegedly bragged about being the only gangster from his generation still having people killed, suggesting that while his contemporaries had either died or gone legitimate, he was still actively involved in ordering murders. In another recorded conversation, Big U allegedly said that he was bigger than deceased rapper Nipsey Hussle and that he had disciplined Nipsey in the past. These statements, made years after Nipsey's death, showed that Big U still harbored resentment toward his former protege and felt the need to assert his dominance even over a dead man. Perhaps most chilling was a recorded conversation where Big U allegedly said that if anyone beefs with him, he would kill them, period. "I am going to murder him," he allegedly stated, showing a casual attitude toward violence that contradicted his public image as a reformed community leader. The financial evidence was equally damaging. Records showed that Big U had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from his nonprofit organization, using money that was supposed to help disadvantaged youth to fund his criminal activities and personal lifestyle. He'd allegedly taken over $2.3 million from the city of LA through various programs, much of which was diverted to his personal use. Federal investigators also uncovered evidence of Big U's systematic extortion operation. They documented instances where he'd forced celebrities and businesses to pay checking-in fees, threatening violence against those who refused to comply. The operation was sophisticated and far-reaching, targeting everyone from out-of-town rappers to local business owners. Testimony from former associates like Loose Cannon provided crucial insider information about Big U's criminal activities. Loose Cannon's account of the phone call before Nipsey's murder was just one piece of a larger puzzle that investigators were putting together, showing a pattern of violence and intimidation that stretched back years. The evidence also included surveillance footage, financial records, and communications that showed Big U's continued involvement in gang activities despite his public claims of reformation. Federal prosecutors argued that his nonprofit work was just a cover for his criminal enterprise, a way to maintain legitimacy while continuing to operate as a gang leader. Understanding why Big U would allegedly want Nipsey dead requires understanding the psychology of power and control that drives gang culture, as well as the specific dynamics of their relationship. For Big U, Nipsey represented everything he'd lost and everything he feared losing. Here was a young man he'd discovered, housed, and launched to stardom, who then had the audacity to publicly disrespect him and cut him out of the profits. In Big U's mind, Nipsey owed him everything: his career, his success, even his life. The idea that Nipsey would try to break free and build his own empire was not just disrespectful, it was an existential threat to Big U's authority. But the motive went deeper than money or wounded pride. Nipsey was becoming bigger than the set, and in gang culture, nobody gets bigger than the set. He was buying property in the neighborhood, opening businesses, talking about economic empowerment and community ownership. He was becoming a leader in his own right, inspiring young people to think beyond the limitations of street life. This transformation threatened Big U's position as the undisputed king of the rolling 60s. If Nipsey could succeed without Big U's blessing, if he could build wealth and influence through legitimate means, what did that say about Big U's relevance? What did it say about the old ways of doing things? Yeah, Nip was getting bigger than the set, cuz, and don't nobody get bigger than the set is what I was told, one gang member explained, capturing the fundamental tension that drove the conflict. There was also the matter of the recording that Big U allegedly had of Nipsey talking to police about another gang member. According to multiple sources, including WAC 100, Big U had been using this recording as leverage over Nipsey for years, forcing him to reconcile and work with Big U even after their public falling out. The recording allegedly captured Nipsey telling police that if anything happened to him, a gang member named Domer would be responsible. This was in the context of a dispute over a woman, but in gang culture, talking to police about anything is considered snitching, a violation that can be punishable by death. Big U allegedly used this recording to manipulate Nipsey, forcing him to maintain their business relationship and public friendship even after their private war had begun. It was a form of blackmail that kept Nipsey under Big U's control, at least partially, right up until his death. But by 2019, Nipsey's success and influence had grown to the point where even this leverage wasn't enough to control him. He was moving independently, making decisions without Big U's input, and building a legacy that would outlast anything Big U had accomplished. In Big U's mind, this couldn't be allowed to continue. The final straw may have been Nipsey's plan to meet with LAPD about ways to reduce gang violence in the community. If Nipsey was going to work directly with law enforcement on community issues, it would further legitimize his role as a leader while potentially exposing Big U's criminal activities to increased scrutiny. If Big U was indeed involved in Nipsey's murder, his behavior in the aftermath was masterful in its deception. While the hip-hop world mourned and conspiracy theories swirled, Big U maintained his image as a reformed OG and community leader, playing the role of grieving mentor to perfection. Within hours of Nipsey's death, Big U posted what appeared to be heartfelt tributes on social media, calling Nipsey like a son and expressing his grief at the loss. The posts were carefully crafted to show him as a man genuinely mourning the loss of his protege, someone who'd loved Nipsey despite their past differences. "I'm hurt at this news," Big U wrote in one post, "but the last time I spoke to Nipsey was 3 days ago at the DJ Khaled video shoot." This detail was particularly interesting because it established that Big U had been in contact with Nipsey shortly before his death, but framed it in the context of a normal business interaction. Big U also organized peace marches and spoke at community events about ending violence, positioning himself as someone working to prevent the kind of tragedy that had claimed Nipsey's life. Outside world, he looked like a man genuinely committed to change, someone who'd learned from the loss of his protege. But there were signs that something wasn't right for those who knew how to look. Big U notably didn't attend Nipsey's funeral, which many found strange given their supposed close relationship and Big U's public expressions of grief. When asked about his absence, Big U gave vague explanations about security concerns and family obligations. There were also reports of Big U making cryptic statements on social media and in interviews that seemed to hint at inside knowledge of the murder. In one Instagram live session, he appeared to laugh when someone commented "Justice for Nip," leading to speculation about his true feelings regarding Nipsey's death. Most tellingly, when Loose Cannon started talking publicly about the phone call he'd received before Nipsey's murder, Big U's lawyers immediately sent cease and desist letters trying to silence him. The legal action was swift and aggressive, suggesting that Big U was desperate to keep certain information from becoming public. The cease and desist letter sent to No Jumper podcast, where Loose Cannon had made his allegations, was particularly revealing. If Big U was innocent, why was he so concerned about Loose Cannon's story? Why not simply deny the allegations publicly rather than trying to silence them through legal intimidation? Big U also worked to control the narrative around Nipsey's death, using his influence in the community and his media connections to promote the official story of a spontaneous killing motivated by accusations of snitching. He appeared on podcasts and interviews where he defended this narrative while subtly discrediting those who suggested there might be more to the story. On March 17, 2025, the walls finally came crashing down around Big U's carefully constructed empire. Federal agents executed simultaneous raids across Los Angeles in what they called Operation Drawdown, a tongue-in-cheek reference to Big U's street name Draws that showed investigators had a sense of irony about their work. The operation was massive in scope, targeting 19 members of the Rolling 60s Crips in coordinated arrests that had been planned for months. Hundreds of agents and officers, including multiple SWAT teams, executed arrest warrants and search warrants at locations across the city. Big U managed to evade the initial sweep, having been tipped off by the street intelligence network that had kept him ahead of law enforcement for decades. But he knew his time was up, knew that the federal government had finally assembled enough evidence to bring him down. In a series of social media posts made while he was on the run, Big U proclaimed his innocence and claimed he was being targeted for helping his community. "It's hard helping black people and not being hunted for doing it," he wrote, playing the race card in a desperate attempt to maintain public support. But the evidence against him was overwhelming, built over years of patient investigation and surveillance. The federal indictment detailed a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for decades, using violence and intimidation to control territory and generate revenue. When Big U finally turned himself in, he looked like a broken man. The OG who'd once struck fear into the hearts of LA's streets was now facing life in federal prison, his empire crumbling around him and his reputation in ruins. The federal wiretaps had captured him in his own words, revealing the true nature of his character and his continued involvement in criminal activities. In recorded conversations, he'd allegedly bragged about his power, threatened his enemies, and shown a casual disregard for human life that contradicted everything he claimed to represent. The investigation also revealed the extent of his financial crimes, showing how he'd used his nonprofit organization to embezzle hundreds of thousands of dollars while claiming to help disadvantaged youth. The hypocrisy was staggering. A man who presented himself as a community leader was allegedly stealing from the very community he claimed to serve. But perhaps most damaging were the hints that investigators were looking at his possible involvement in Nipsey's murder. While the indictment didn't directly charge him with the killing, it contained enough references to suggest that federal prosecutors believed there was more to the story than had been revealed in state court. As the federal case against Big U moved forward, more details emerged about the investigation and the evidence that had been gathered over years of surveillance. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd never really left the streets, despite his public claims of reformation and community service. The wiretapped conversations were particularly damaging, revealing Big U's true thoughts and intentions in his own words. In one recorded call, he allegedly discussed his relationship with Nipsey, claiming that he was bigger than the deceased rapper and that he disciplined him in the past. These statements, made years after Nipsey's death, showed that Big U still harbored resentment and felt the need to assert his dominance even over a dead man. In another conversation, Big U allegedly made statements about being willing to kill anyone who beefed with him, showing a casual attitude toward violence that contradicted his public image as a reformed gang member. "I'm going to murder him," he allegedly said, revealing the mindset that had allegedly driven his criminal activities for decades. The investigation also uncovered evidence of Big U's systematic approach to maintaining power and control. He'd allegedly used his nonprofit organization as a front for criminal activities, his media appearances to project a false image of reformation, and his street reputation to intimidate rivals and maintain discipline within his organization. Federal prosecutors argued that Big U had been living a double life, presenting himself as a community leader and reformed gang member while continuing to operate as the head of a criminal enterprise. The evidence suggested that his charitable work and media appearances were carefully calculated moves designed to provide cover for his continued criminal activities. The case also revealed the sophisticated nature of Big U's operation. He'd allegedly used modern technology and business practices to run his criminal enterprise, employing everything from wiretapping to financial fraud to maintain his power and generate revenue. But the most explosive revelation was the suggestion that federal investigators were looking at Big U's possible involvement in Nipsey's murder. While he hadn't been formally charged with the killing, the indictment contained enough references and evidence to suggest that prosecutors believed there was a connection. The phone call that Loose Cannon claimed to have received 30 minutes before Nipsey's death remained a key piece of evidence. If accurate, it suggested that Big U had advanced knowledge of the murder and was expecting it to have already been carried out when he made the call. The story of Big U and Nipsey Hussle is ultimately a tragedy of what happens when love turns to hate, when mentorship becomes manipulation, and when the streets consume everything they touch. It's a story that reveals the dark underbelly of gang culture and the price of trying to escape its gravitational pull. Two men from the same neighborhood, the same gang who should have been brothers, ended up as mortal enemies locked in a war that could only end in death. One is gone, cut down in his prime just as he was reaching his full potential as an artist, businessman, and community leader. The other is facing life in federal prison, his legacy forever tainted by allegations of the ultimate betrayal. The federal investigation has revealed the extent of Big U's alleged criminal enterprise and the sophisticated methods he used to maintain power while projecting an image of reformation. The wiretapped conversations, financial records, and witness testimony paint a picture of a man who never really left the streets, despite his public claims to the contrary. But this story isn't over. Federal investigators are still building their case, and if they can prove Big U was involved in Nipsey's murder, it would represent justice not just for Nipsey, but for everyone who believed in his vision of community empowerment and economic independence. The phone call that Loose Cannon received 30 minutes before Nipsey's death might be the smoking gun that finally brings Big U down. And if it is, it would prove that sometimes the streets have a way of revealing their secrets, no matter how deep they're buried or how carefully they're hidden. The war between Big U and Nipsey Hussle may have started over a diss track and some recording equipment, but it ended with one of hip-hop's brightest stars dead and one of LA's most feared gangsters facing life behind bars. It's a tragedy that goes far beyond any beef or any gang. It's a tragedy for all of us who believe that hip-hop could lift people up instead of tearing them down. What do you think? Was Big U involved in Nipsey's murder, or is this all just speculation and conspiracy theories? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into hip-hop's most controversial stories. Because in the streets, the truth always comes to light. It just takes time. Rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. The marathon continues, and your legacy will outlast all the hatred and violence that tried to stop you.
Okay, so Pooh Shiesty drops, Pooh Shiesty and Durk dropped the song Back in Blood. and you guys respond to it. So you guys took that first song has a diss towards you guys.
The sound, yeah, you could tell I took it as a diss, but the reason what made me respond is because it was just false as hell. Like, it just was a whole bunch of make-believe and exaggerated situation. So that what just made me respond.
On New Year's Day 2021, a man from North Memphis woke up, walked into a studio, and recorded a diss track aimed directly at the most dangerous crew coming out of the city. He wasn't a rapper. He wasn't chasing streams or a deal or a plaque on the wall. He was responding to a very real, very personal situation that had been building in the streets of Memphis for years. He put that song out. It went up. The internet went crazy. 3 days later, he got shot 3 times. Now, most people, when they get shot, they go to the hospital. They lay low. They thank God they survived, and they take the L and they figure out their next move in private. That's the logical response. That's the human response. Not this man. He pulled himself together, got the bullets removed from his arm, threw a cast on it, went back to the studio still in that cast, and dropped another diss track. And he didn't just drop any diss track. He named it Paralyzed, because the internet was saying the shooting left him paralyzed. He walked back in and named the comeback track after the thing they said broke him. That one decision, that one move, tells you everything you need to know about the war we're talking about today. This is not a beef that started on Twitter. This is not 2 rappers going back and forth over a sample clearance or a feature that didn't get paid. This is a full-scale, years-long, deadly documented street war between 2 of the most dangerous sets in one of the most dangerous cities in the entire United States of America. This is Choppa Gang versus EBG, South Memphis versus North Memphis. And by the time you finish this video, you're going to understand exactly how this started, exactly how deep it went, and exactly where things stand right now in 22/6, because the story is far from over. We're talking federal prison sentences. We're talking bodies. We're talking about a rap song that accidentally broadcast a private street war to 50 million people in a single month. We're talking about a man who got sentenced to 20 years and another man who just walked out of a federal penitentiary after 1,000 days inside and came straight back to the city that forged him. This one goes all the way. Stay with me. Before we can talk about Choppa Gang and EBG, we need to talk about Memphis, because you cannot understand this war without understanding the city that built both of these crews. Memphis, Tennessee, 3rd most dangerous city in the United States of America. And that's not a ranking that Memphis earned in 1 year. That's a title the city has held, lost, and reclaimed repeatedly over decades. Memphis is the kind of city where the extremes live right next to each other, without apology. It is the heart of the Bible Belt. More churches per square mile than almost any other city in the country. Southern hospitality, good food, hardworking people who will give you the shirt off their back, blues music, soul music, the birthplace of rock and roll, Beale Street, Graceland, the legacy of Dr. King, who was assassinated in this city at the Lorraine Motel in 1968. Memphis carries all of that history. And on the other side of that same coin, in neighborhoods like South Memphis, North Memphis, Orange Mound, Fraser, Whitehaven, you have some of the most concentrated poverty and violence in the American South. In certain parts of Memphis, your life expectancy is literally 20 years shorter than people who live just a few miles away in the wealthier parts of the city. 20 years, just because of the zip code you were born in. Families in some of these neighborhoods are sleeping on the floor at night to avoid getting hit by gunfire coming through the walls. That's not a metaphor. That's what's actually happening. People whose kids can't play outside after dark because the odds of catching a stray bullet are too real to take that chance. Memphis also has every single national gang operating within its borders. Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, Bloods, Crips. But what makes Memphis different from other major cities is what law enforcement calls the hybrid gang situation. You've got all these smaller, tighter cliques and mobs that have broken away from or operate alongside the bigger sets. Young crews who aren't beholden to the politics or the structure of any national organization. No old heads running things. No OG telling them to hold back. Just young men with paramilitary weapons and a loyalty to each other that overrides everything else. These smaller crews are, by almost every measure, more dangerous than the bigger organized sets, because they need less of a reason to pull a trigger, and there's less holding them accountable when they do. That's the world that produced both Choppa Gang and EBG. And the thing about Memphis that outsiders don't always catch, it's a small world. Everybody knows everybody. The city is big enough to have different sides and different territories, but small enough that the people on those different sides went to the same schools, grew up on the same corners, and know each other's faces. That closeness is part of what makes the beef so personal. You're not fighting a stranger. You're fighting someone whose name you know, someone you might have nodded at in the hallway of your high school 10 years ago. And that history, that familiarity, doesn't make the violence softer, it makes it sharper. Let's go all the way back to where Pooh Shiesty came from. Born Lontrell Williams, Pooh Shiesty grew up in the Cane Creek Apartments in South Memphis. To give you a sense of the geography, Cane Creek is not far from where Moneybagg Yo was coming up, not far from where Young Dolph was building his empire, not far from where Black Youngsta was making noise. South Memphis has always been a breeding ground for a certain kind of energy, and Shiesty was the purest version of that energy you could find. His father was a known figure in the streets before Pooh was even old enough to understand what that meant. His dad was a co-founder of a record label called Mob Ties, but the label was more of a front for what was really happening behind closed doors. In 2006, one of the artists on that label, a man who went by the name Miscellaneous, got into a triple shooting at a birthday party in Memphis. The club managers running that event already knew there was beef between Miscellaneous and another artist named Yo Gotti. They knew. And instead of canceling the show, instead of making the responsible call, they hired 35 security guards and set up 4 metal detectors at the door. It didn't work. The shooting still happened. 3 people got hit. That same year, Shiesty's father caught a felony conviction, accessory to the murder of a local female DJ. He got put on supervised parole, but being on supervised parole didn't stop him from moving. For almost a full year after that conviction, he was running a trap house on a street called Porter, a dead-end block that looked completely abandoned from the outside, a ghost house. Nothing to see here. What he didn't know was that Memphis police had been watching that spot for months. One morning, officers made their move. They stormed apartment 3, on the kitchen counter, measuring cups, digital scales. The place was a working operation. In all the chaos of the raid, a 75-pound pit bull came sprinting around the corner and leaped straight at the officers. They shot it 3 times. It retreated to the kitchen and died. People were running through the apartment, jumping through windows, glass shattering everywhere. Shiesty's father tried to make it from apartment 3 to apartment 4. They cornered him in the kitchen. The haul, 12.5 grams of cocaine, 8 pounds of marijuana, and $10,000 in cash they pulled directly from his left pocket. That was the household Pooh Shiesty grew up in. That was the example set for him before he was a teenager. By age 11, Shiesty had already been arrested and expelled from middle school at the same time simultaneously. He was wearing an ankle monitor before most kids his age had a cell phone, and that wasn't something that slowed him down or scared him straight. If anything, it told him this was just how life worked. This was the playbook. Memphis is a small world. Everyone's connected. And as Shiesty got older, his reputation started to travel. He was known for being aggressive, for moving on people, for taking things that weren't his and daring people to say something about it. That's literally where the name Shiesty came from. He was Shiesty. He was on it. He moved different and everybody around him knew it. When he got to Central High School, things started to click into place in a different way. He expanded his circle, connected with his childhood friend Big 30, real name Thessalonica Cornell, who was from Whitehaven, linked with a guy named Lil Hank, another named Antwop, and a few other solid individuals. And together, this group came up with a name for themselves, Choppa Gang. Now within Choppa Gang, different members came from different big sets. Some had Grape Street Crips connections, some had Piru blood affiliations. But Choppa Gang itself operated as its own thing. They weren't flying one flag or following one set's politics. They were their own unit, and the loyalty within that unit was absolute. There's a story about a Choppa Gang member who went by the name White Grape, also called White Boy Kenny. He was known around Central High for being a character, popular with the girls, well-liked. He got jumped into the Grape Street Crips. They beat him thoroughly, took a photo of the aftermath that went viral around Memphis. Official member. But not long after that, White Grape allegedly got his own gun robbed from him. In Choppa Gang, that kind of slip-up is not just embarrassing, it's a violation. It's a credibility question that the crew can't afford to ignore. So they cut ties with White Grape, disowned him completely. Months later, White Grape was involved in a drug deal that went wrong. A client tried to pay him with counterfeit money. White Grape shot and killed him. That story matters not because White Grape became a main figure in the CGEBG war, but because it illustrates the culture around Choppa Gang perfectly. Accountability was everything. If you couldn't hold yours, you were gone, and whatever happened to you after that was on you. By 2016, Shiesty had already been shaped by real loss. He says himself, before the age of 15 in Memphis, you're going to lose someone close to you, guaranteed. Around 2016, he lost his best friend, a guy named Trey Day, and that loss did something to Shiesty on the inside. He's talked about it in interviews, said it turned his heart cold, said he made a decision after Trey Day died to live without remorse, to be a menace, to stop waiting for the world to make sense and just move through it the only way he knew how. After graduating high school in 2018, Choppa Gang had multiple streams of income moving simultaneously, and they started investing some of that money into studio time, not necessarily with big dreams of going platinum, but because the music felt like a natural extension of who they already were. They've been living this story for years, might as well put it on a record. Their first song, Breaking News, dropped near the end of 2018. It went up immediately. By 2019, they were buzzing hard enough that Big 3-0 got signed to Moneybagg Yo's Bread Gang imprint. Shiesty stayed independent, dropping singles consistently, building his fan base organically, and the numbers were getting attention at the highest levels. Gucci Mane was in the process of stacking his 1017 roster with the rawest talent he could find. He heard one Shiesty song on YouTube, hit him up directly on Instagram. Paperwork got drawn up, major label deal with Atlantic Records. Choppa Gang was officially in the industry, and with that came a level of visibility that changed everything, including the stakes of the beast they were already in. Now we need to talk about the other side of this war. EBG, the Everybody Gang, also referred to as Bezel Gang, based out of North Memphis, and that distinction matters more than it might seem to people who aren't from there. The North-South divide in Memphis is not just a geographical thing. It's cultural, historical, and deeply personal to the people who live it. South Memphis and North Memphis have had tension running between them for as long as anyone can remember. Different sets dominate different parts of the city. Different rules apply on different blocks. And the people who grow up in those areas are shaped by those specific environments in ways that outsiders don't always clock. EBG came out of North Memphis. Their most prominent rapper and public face was a man named EBG E-Jizzle. And here's the detail that makes this whole story sharper. E-Jizzle and Pooh Shiesty went to the same high school, Central High School. They knew each other. They walked the same hallways, grew up in the same city, were products of the same Memphis that was simultaneously churning out blues legends and funeral programs. But they were from different sides, different affiliations, different worlds that happened to share a school. EBG were not rappers who were also from the streets. That framing is backwards. They were street people who occasionally made music. That distinction is important because when this war became public, when Back in Blood put their name in front of 50 million people worldwide, EBG didn't respond as artists defending their brand. They responded as people who had a very real score to settle and happened to have access to a recording booth. The tension between CG and EBG didn't begin with a song. Let's be crystal clear about that. There was already history, already bad blood. The beef had roots in the streets of Memphis that go back further than any YouTube video will take you. Territorial issues, money issues, pride issues, the kind of accumulated friction that builds between two crews over years when they exist in the same city and want different things from the same streets. What Back in Blood did was force all of that private history into the open, on a worldwide platform, without either side fully anticipating the scale of what was about to happen. And once it was out there was no walking it back. November 6th, 2020, Lil Durk and Pooh Shiesty dropped the audio for Back in Blood. The timing of that release date is worth noting, because November 6, 2020 is the exact same day that King Von died in Atlanta. Von was shot outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge following an altercation involving Quando Rondo's crew. He died in the hospital. Durk, who was Von's closest brother in the game, was devastated. The whole rap world was grieving. And on that same day, that specific Friday, Back in Blood goes live. Durk's verse on the song was personal. It was about loyalty, about brotherhood, about riding for the people you love. Given what happened that same day with Von, the emotion behind his verse hit even harder for people who were already processing that loss. But in Memphis, nobody was focused on Durk's verse. Every single person in the city who knew the streets, who knew the players, who knew the history, they were locked in on Shiesty's verse, specifically on one line. Yeah, you know who took that shit from you. Come get it back in blood. That line was not abstract. That line was a direct, specific, personal message aimed at EBG. Because what had happened, what Shiesty was referencing, was a robbery. Shiesty and two members of Choppa Gang had gone to an EBG house, run up in it, and taken a collection of guns from them. robbed them. And now, with Atlantic Records behind him, with a Lil Durk feature, with a proper music video getting ready to drop, he was putting it on record, worldwide. He was announcing what he'd done and daring them to respond. EBG's side, E-Jizzle specifically, confirmed the robbery happened in interviews. But E-Jizzle's take was different from how Shiesty was telling it. He said Shiesty's crew didn't get anything truly significant. Said nobody was even home when they came through. Said Shiesty was taking a routine street incident and inflating it into mythology to build a tough image in the music industry. In E-Jizzle's words, Shiesty was just trying to feud with any rapper he could find from North Memphis. But here's the thing. It didn't matter what E-Jizzle believed about Shiesty's motivations. The song was real. The disrespect was real, and Back in Blood didn't just chart, it erupted. Within 4 weeks, 50 million views on YouTube alone. The week it peaked, Shiesty was the second most streamed artist in the entire country, trailing only Drake. He had billboards up across America. His debut album moved 60,000 units in its first week. He was signed to Gucci's 1017 in Atlantic. He was everywhere. And while all of those numbers were climbing, while Shiesty was being interviewed, being photographed, being celebrated as the new face of Memphis rap, EBG was watching every single second of it, watching a man they had beef with in real life become a mainstream star, watching their private conflict turned into content that was making someone else millions. Then, a few weeks later at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Shiesty posted on Facebook a cryptic, direct warning. Drop that song and you're not going to live to see that baby arrive. That message was aimed at EBG, and they'd been working on a response. He warned them. They had heard it. They dropped the song anyway. January 1st, 2021, New Year's Day. While the rest of the world was making resolutions and nursing hangovers, EBG walked into a studio in North Memphis and put out a remix to Back in Blood. Same beat, completely different energy. They went at Shiesty line by line, responding to every claim he'd made on the original. They addressed the robbery, they addressed the narrative, they gave their side of the story to the world. And in the video, they were wearing hoodies with 3 letters on them. CGK, Choppa Gang Killer. That was not a subtle message. That was a statement of intent broadcast to millions of people. Shiesty responded on social media almost immediately. He went online and said this was the worst move EBG had ever made. Said he had already done 18 million views off of them before he'd even said their name publicly. And then, one day later, January 2nd, Shiesty dropped the full music video for Back in Blood that he and Durk had filmed in Chicago months earlier and been sitting on. He'd been holding that video back. Now he released it, perfectly timed to make Back in Blood trend again, to climb the Billboard charts again, to flood the algorithm at exactly the moment EBG's response was getting attention. It was a masterclass in using the music industry machinery as a weapon. EBG had responded. Shiesty used their response to make himself bigger. EBG's original remix kept getting hit with copyright strikes. Every time they posted it, it got taken down. They'd get a few 100,000 views before it disappeared. So E-Jizzle went back to the studio and wrote something new, original material. A diss track called Rumors. Rumors went up and immediately started running. Hit 1 million views in less than a week. People were watching. The comments were going crazy. Memphis rap beef had found its way to mainstream audiences who didn't even fully understand the context. And then the streets reminded everyone that this was never just a rap beef. Just days after Rumors went live, E-Jizzle got shot. 3 bullets found him. They hit his arm. He ended up in the hospital bed, spread everywhere. He's in the frame, arm messed up, invisible pain, and he's filming himself. He says the words, "I can't walk, I can't," and then he stops. It wasn't clear initially what the full extent of the damage was. The internet ran with the worst interpretation. People were saying he was paralyzed, that he was done, that his arm was gone. Pooh Shiesty got on Instagram stories that same night, posted, "Damn, that pussy dissed, now he can't even walk." The memes started, the take started. Memphis rap Twitter was on fire, but E-Jizzle was not paralyzed. 3 bullets had hit his arm. They removed them. He put a cast on and got back to moving almost immediately. And here's where the story becomes genuinely unbelievable, because instead of laying low, instead of taking time to heal, E-Jizzle went back to the studio, in the cast, and he recorded a 3rd diss track. He called it Paralyzed, not in defeat, not as an admission that the shooting broke him. He called it Paralyzed, to reclaim that word, to take the thing people were saying about him and turn it into armor. In the song, he went after Shiesty directly, called him a snitch, called him an internet gangster who relied on his label for protection, questioned why if Shiesty's crew was so dangerous they shot him in the arm and not somewhere fatal. He was taunting back, in a cast, after getting shot 3 times. But here's where fate stepped in and made the whole situation even heavier. The morning that Paralyzed dropped, the exact same morning the song went live, Pooh Shiesty's brother passed away. He had been on life support for days, fighting for every breath, and he was pronounced dead just hours before EBG released that 3rd diss track. Nobody could have planned that timing, but it happened. And whatever was already burning between these 2 crews, whatever heat had been building, that moment threw gasoline on it, not because EBG knew, not because anyone planned it that way, just because life in Memphis is like that. Multiple tragedies running on the same clock at the same time. Paralyzed went on to get nearly 400,000 views in a week. E-Jizzle went from a couple thousand followers to 50,000 almost overnight. Memphis had found its opposite story. The man who wouldn't stay down, the North Memphis rapper who took a bullet and came back louder. But behind all of those views and all of those comments and all of those memes, the streets were moving. And what was happening on the streets of Memphis during all of this was far more serious than any diss track. Here's the part of this story that the internet doesn't give enough time to. Because while the rap beef was playing out publicly, while people were dropping diss tracks and going back and forth on Instagram and counting views, the actual war between Choppa Gang and EBG was happening in real life, in real time, in the streets of Memphis. And it was deadly, not in a metaphorical rap lyric way, in a real people are not coming home way. The music gave outsiders a window into this conflict, but what was actually happening behind that window was a full-scale gang war with real casualties. On both sides, members of both crews got hit. Some were hospitalized, some were permanently disabled, some did not survive. And the families of those people, the mothers, the brothers, the children, they didn't get YouTube videos. They got phone calls, they got funerals, they got empty chairs at the dinner table. Memphis had already been carrying generational violence for decades, but in the early 2020s, in the years surrounding this CG-EBG war, the city hit levels that even longtime residents described as unlike anything they'd seen. The violence intensified across the board, and the hybrid gang culture that law enforcement kept warning about, those smaller, decentralized renegade crews with less structure and fewer checks on their behavior, was driving a lot of it. What makes the CG-EBG war particularly brutal as a study in gang conflict is the factor of familiarity. These weren't anonymous enemies. These were people who knew each other, who had history with each other, who in some cases had been to the same school. And that familiarity doesn't soften the violence, it sharpens it. Because when you know someone and you've decided they're your enemy, the beef becomes personal in a way that makes it harder to de-escalate. North Memphis and South Memphis have been building toward this kind of confrontation for a long time. The geography of the city, the way different neighborhoods are organized, the way different sets have claimed different territories over the years, had always created the conditions for this kind of war. CG and EBG were in many ways the culmination of that tension, reaching a breaking point in a new generation. And the music just happened to catch it at exactly the moment it went supernova. Every bar Shiesty rapped about, the robberies, the ops, the bodies, that wasn't creative writing. That was journalism. He was reporting on events that had already happened, and when EBG responded, they weren't making up their side either. They were responding to a real situation with real stakes that had been playing out in the physical world long before it ever touched a microphone. Memphis in 2021 was a powder keg, and Back in Blood was the spark that made the whole world look at the flame. While the streets were doing what they do, the legal system was closing in on Choppa Gang from multiple directions simultaneously. Let's start with the members, then get to Shiesty himself. Lil Hank, one of the founding members of Choppa Gang, was locked up facing an attempted murder charge. Prosecutors alleged that he shot up a vehicle and paralyzed the person inside, and that the shooting was a case of mistaken identity. Wrong car, wrong person. The kind of story that illustrates just how indiscriminate street violence can be when it's moving at that speed and operating on incomplete information. Choppa T, another key CG member, was facing a murder charge plus 2 additional attempted murder charges. His situation was even more serious than Hank's on paper. Big 3-0, Shiesty's closest friend since childhood, the guy who was with him when Choppa Gang first formed, caught felony drug charges in Alabama just 2 weeks before Shiesty's big arrest. Got extradited back to Memphis for a separate case he was already fighting there. Made bond and dropped a song called First Day Out like nothing had happened. Because in Memphis, that's just what you do. And then there was Shiesty himself, October 2020, Bay Harbor Islands, Florida. This is a small municipality in Miami-Dade County. and it just happens to sit right across the street from the local police department and town hall. Police and prosecutors say Shiesty was part of a group that ended up in a parking lot there that afternoon. A man had been trying to sell Shiesty weed in a pair of Jordans. What happened next, according to investigators, was a straight-up robbery. They put guns on the man, took his stuff, shot him, and he ended up in the hospital. Shiesty's crew allegedly fled in a green McLaren, left the state in a private jet. That arrest happened. He bonded out. And then, amazingly, given everything that was happening legally, he continued to drop music, do press, sign billboards, rack up streams. He was operating at the peak of his mainstream run while simultaneously fighting a serious case in Florida. June 2021, he gets arrested again, this time in connection with a strip club shooting in Atlanta. Second major arrest in less than a year, the dominoes were falling. January 2022, Pooh Shiesty pleaded guilty to federal firearms conspiracy charges in connection with the Florida case. No trial, a plea. He took it. April 2022, sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in federal prison. Shipped to USP Kanan in Pennsylvania, the most streamed rapper in Memphis history. The man who was second only to Drake for a full week. The face of a movement that had put Memphis back on the mainstream rap map in a way it hadn't been since the 3-6 Mafia era. He was gone. Just like that, 5 years and 3 months in a federal penitentiary. The Choppa Gang chapter, at least its most publicly visible version, went dark. With Shiesty gone, the attention shifted, and law enforcement had been building their own case on the other side of this war for quite some time. The Memphis Safe Task Force, a multi-agency operation combining local police, federal investigators, and specialized gang units, had been working quietly for years, building files, documenting activity, using social media posts, surveillance footage, confidential informants, and every other tool in the box to build cases that would hold up in federal court. EBG was squarely in their crosshairs. Alongside other active Memphis factions, the Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, Young Mob, Grape Street Crips, EBG was identified as one of the city's most active and violent street organizations. Over the course of this investigation, the task force made over 400 gang-related arrests across those target groups, and EBG took some of the most significant hits. Let's talk about the individual cases. Moo Slime, real name Courtney Campbell, one of EBG's most active members, and one of the key figures connected to the original beef from 2021. Moo Slime had been in police reports 8 separate times over a 5-year period, all involving firearms. 8 times. That includes a 2022 arrest for pointing a Draco-style assault pistol at people who were attending a candlelight vigil, a memorial service. He allegedly showed up with a Draco. Investigators didn't need much imagination to build a case on Moo Slime. They had years of documentation. And when he made the mistake, as so many people in these situations do, of posting himself on social media with a firearm, investigators worked backward from that footage, identified the specific gun, cross-referenced it with existing records, showing he was a convicted felon, and built their case. In March 2000, Moo Slime was arrested after discharging a weapon in a public.
Give it up, Young Dolph, in the building.
A lot of people, they have vision, they have dreams and shit, but they don't put up no percentage or no effort trying to make that shit come to life.
Bro, for the last 6 months, I've been having a $22 million contract debating on should I do the deal or not. Fuck the 22 million.
November 17th, 2021, 12:24 p.m. A bulletproof Corvette pulls into a cookie shop in South Memphis. By 12:30, one of hip-hop's most independent success stories is gone. 22 bullets ending a life but igniting a war that would claim over a dozen more.
Violent attack against rapper Young Dolph, a man who proclaimed to be the, quote, king of Memphis.
Young Dolph, the man who survived 100 shots in Charlotte, who turned down millions to stay independent, who built Paper Route empire from the mud, executed in broad daylight at Makita's Cookies. But this wasn't random. This was the culmination of a 7-year beef that started with a rejected record deal.
Take the 22 million, or fuck the 22 million.
And spiraled into one of the deadliest rap wars Memphis has ever seen. The numbers tell a chilling story. $100,000 bounty, multiple attempts on Dolph's life, a white Mercedes, 2 shooters. And in the aftermath, bodies dropping every few months for 3 straight years. From comedians to rappers, from street soldiers to the brother of a rap mogul, nobody was safe. The Memphis Police Department literally told citizens to stay home. The city became a war zone. But here's what most people don't know. If Young Dolph hadn't been killed that day, Yo Gotti might have been the one in a casket. Evidence would later reveal that Paper Route Empire wasn't just defending, they were hunting, and the man who allegedly orchestrated Dolph's murder, Big Jook, Yo Gotti's own brother, he'd be dead within 3 years, gunned down outside a funeral in what many call the ultimate get-back.
5 police sources have confirmed with Fox 13 that the person killed is Anthony Mims, also known as Big Jook.
This is the story of how a business disagreement between two Memphis legends became a blood feud that changed the city forever. How pride, money, and street politics turned the birthplace of blues into a battlefield, and how even after arrests, trials, and convictions, the war still isn't over.
I'm always on edge because there's cases I thought I would have won easily, and the jurors just get swayed by the publicity and the media. It's been so one-sided, calling him a mastermind. The press has been going crazy because only the DA talks.
Stay until the end, because what I'm about to reveal about the bounties, the failed peace talks, and who's really pulling the strings will change everything you thought you knew about this beef. This is the Deadly Memphis War, CMG versus Paper Route Empire. To understand how this war started, you gotta understand Memphis. This ain't Atlanta with room for everybody. This ain't LA where you can have your own lane. Memphis is a small city with a big ego, and for decades, the question of who runs it has been answered in blood. By 2014, Yo Gotti was already a Memphis legend. Born Mario Mims in the Ridgecrest Apartments in North Memphis, Gotti had been grinding since the late 90s. He'd battled 3-6 Mafia for the crown, survived the streets, and finally broke through mainstream with hits like Down in the DM and Rake It Up. He'd started his label, CMG, Collective Music Group.
Label bought 500 and I was just 500 in the hole with you.
And was positioning himself as the kingmaker of Memphis rap. Gotti wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was a mogul, a businessman who transformed from street hustler to legitimate entrepreneur. His come-up story was the blueprint for Memphis success. Then there was young Dolph. Born Adolph Thornton Jr. in Chicago, but raised in South Memphis's Castalia Heights, Dolph represented something different. He was the ultimate independent artist. No major label, no cosigns needed, just hustle, bulletproof confidence, and Paper Route Empire.
Period. One thing about life is like people can try to and be fake and go around it like, oh, you change, like ain't no changing you. You can be a better you can be the best you.
The label he built with his partner Daddy-O. By 2014, Dolph was buzzing hard with mixtapes like High Class Street Music and Blue Magic. What made Dolph special wasn't just his music, it was his message. He preached independence, self-reliance, and ownership. He'd invested his own money from the streets into his career, and he wore that badge with pride. Here's where it gets interesting. According to multiple interviews, Yo Gotti saw Dolph's potential early.
Some people say Gotti wanted to sign Dolph and Dolph didn't want to sign.
Right.
Some people say, well, both of them had crews that were into some street shit or whatever.
He wanted to sign him to CMG. It made sense. Two Memphis titans joining forces could have dominated the industry. Gotti had the machine, the connections, the infrastructure. He had relationships with major labels, distribution deals, and a proven track record of breaking artists. Dolph had the talent, the streets, and the hunger. On paper, it was a perfect partnership, but Dolph said no. In a 2016 interview with Sway, Dolph explained his reasoning with a clarity that showed this wasn't just business, it was personal principle. Gotti wanted me to do the CMG Paper Route thing.
Like I could have went over there and got with Gotti and got the co-signer and sped my whole process up, but at the same time, I couldn't do it because I had too much of my own money and too much of my own time invested into it.
That's cool, I'm not knocking it, but if I was him, I would have came to me like that too. But the only thing that was gonna happen behind it was people saying he popped out because of Gotti, which I can't do that because I got too much of my own time and money invested. Dolph wasn't just turning down a deal, he was protecting his legacy. He'd invested his own drug money into his career, built his own buzz, created his own lane. Signing to Gotti would have made business sense, but it would have compromised the very independence that made Dolph special. In Dolph's mind, he'd already put in the work. He'd already built the foundation.
So it wouldn't have made sense for me. You see what I'm saying? And man, it's like, that's Memphis, bro. That town is too small.
Why would he give someone else credit for what he'd built with his own hands? For most artists, this would have been the end of it. A declined offer, mutual respect, everybody moves on. But in Memphis, where respect is currency and perception is everything, Dolph's rejection was seen as disrespect. Gotti had extended his hand to help, and Dolph had slapped it away. In the streets, that's a violation. It suggested that Dolph thought he was too good for CMG, that he didn't need Gotti, that maybe he even looked down on what Gotti had built. And in the streets, disrespect gets answered.
if you pay attention, it always been a artist at the city saying, I'm the king of Memphis, I'm the king of Memphis.
The tension started building slowly. There were subliminal shots in songs, social media posts that seemed innocent but carried weight if you knew the context. Gotti would rap about fake independent artists who were really struggling. Dolph would rap about label bosses who were really just middlemen taking percentages. The shots were subtle at first, but anyone paying attention could see the storm clouds gathering. The beef didn't explode overnight, it simmered. Started with subliminals, social media shade, and competitive tension. Throughout 2015, both artists were dropping projects and building their brands, but the underlying tension was always there. Dolph was proving his independent model could work, racking up millions of streams and selling out shows without a major label or CMG backing.
You ain't gotta not do the deal, but you ain't gotta not do it right now either. So you trying to tell me, oh, if I don't do the deal right now, I can't never come back and do a deal. No.
Every success Dolph had was an indirect challenge to Gotti's authority as the king of Memphis. By early 2016, things were getting personal. Dolph had started making comments in interviews about how certain Memphis rappers had tried to sign him, but he wasn't interested. He never said Gotti's name directly, but everyone knew who he was talking about. Gotti, for his part, was dropping subliminals in his music about artists who were too proud to accept help and would regret it later. Then came February 19th, 2016, the day everything changed. Dolph dropped an album called King of Memphis. The title alone was a declaration of war.
From back in the day, in the 3-6 era and the Yo Gotti era, that didn't make it and didn't really just pop out big, that could have made it and supposed to made it. But Memphis got that I mentality. It always been the king of Memphis. I'm the king, I'm the king, I'm the king.
Gotti had been calling himself the king of Memphis for years, ever since he'd outlasted 3-6 Mafia and become the city's biggest star. Now Dolph was claiming the crown, and he didn't stop there. He released the song, Play With Yo Beach, a vicious diss track aimed directly at Gotti. The lyrics were brutal and personal in ways that crossed every line. Dolph rapped about sleeping with the mother of Gotti's child, describing intimate details that made it clear this wasn't just rap. This was real disrespect. He talked about Gotti begging him to sign, painting him as desperate and thirsty. He brought up how Gotti only got famous by dissing 3-6 Mafia, suggesting his entire career was built on clout chasing and controversy rather than genuine talent. But the most inflammatory part was when Dolph went at Gotti's brother, Big Jook. He claimed he used to serve Jook drugs back in the day, essentially calling him a customer and putting him beneath Dolph in the street hierarchy. In street culture, that's unforgivable disrespect. You can diss a man's music, his money, even his woman, but when you disrespect his family and suggest you were above them in the streets, that's a line you can't uncross. The music video made it even worse. Dolph hired actors who looked like Gotti and Big Jook and had them playing weak, emotional characters crying about Dolph taking their girl. It was humiliating, public, and designed to provoke a response. And it worked. Gotti's artist, Black Youngsta, responded within days. Youngsta was known as Gotti's shooter, the wild card who handled the grimmier side of CMG business. He pulled up to Dolph's neighborhood, Castalia Heights, with guns drawn, filming himself calling out Dolph. "Where you at? We in Castalia right now. We just left the store. Where you at right now, dog?" It was reckless, public, and a clear escalation. Youngsta was walking through Dolph's hood with choppers, essentially daring him to come outside. Dolph responded on social media, laughing at the whole thing. He posted videos mocking Youngsta and Gotti, calling them broke and desperate for attention. He said they were using his name to stay relevant because their own music wasn't popping. The disrespect was mutual now, and it was spiraling out of control. Behind the scenes, things were getting even more serious. According to later court testimony and street rumors, this is when the first real discussions about putting money on Dolph's head started happening. It wasn't just about music anymore, it was about respect, territory, and who really ran Memphis. But the real turning point came on February 26, 2017, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dolph was in Charlotte for the CIAA basketball tournament, a major annual event that draws thousands of people from historically black colleges. It's a weekend of parties, concerts, and networking, basically a cultural event for the black community. Dolph had been booked to perform at multiple venues throughout the weekend. He'd just finished a day party performance around 5 p.m. and was heading to his next show scheduled for later that night. Around 6:30 p.m., as Dolph's convoy rolled down Caldwell Street in downtown Charlotte, a vehicle pulled up alongside them. What happened next was described by witnesses as something out of a movie. The occupants of the trailing vehicle opened fire with high-powered weapons, unleashing a barrage of bullets that seemed to never stop. Over 100 rounds were fired at Dolph's black Cadillac Escalade. The sound was deafening. Shell casings littered the street. Surrounding cars were hit. Bullets pierced through apartment windows in nearby buildings. Innocent bystanders dove for cover. It was chaos, a military-style ambush in the middle of a busy city street. The shooters weren't just trying to scare Dolph, they were trying to obliterate him. They wanted to make sure there was no chance of survival. They dumped entire magazines, reloaded, and kept shooting. It was overkill in the most literal sense. But here's the thing, Dolph had spent $300,000 to bulletproof that Escalade. He'd reinforced the doors, the windows, the body, everything. He'd done it after the previous threats and close calls, and that investment saved his life. Every single one of those 100-plus bullets bounced off or got lodged in the armor. Dolph and everyone in his vehicle walked away without a scratch. The audacity of what happened next is what made Dolph a legend. Instead of going into hiding, instead of canceling his shows and leaving town, Dolph went and performed at his scheduled show that same night. He got on stage, adrenaline still pumping, and performed his Gotti diss track for the crowd. He was sending a message: you can't kill me, you can't scare me, I'm untouchable. Within weeks, Dolph turned the assassination attempt into a marketing opportunity. He dropped an album called Bulletproof with a black Escalade on the cover, the same type of vehicle he'd been in during the shooting. The track list read like a message to his enemies. 100 shots in Charlotte, but I'm bulletproof, so fuck them. That's how I feel, all of them. I'm so real. I pray for my enemies. I'm everything you want to be. Shake my head. The lead single, 100 Shots, featured Gucci Mane and included the line, "For 100 shots, I heard you paid 100 stacks. Hope you got your receipt. Go and get your 100 back." Dolph was literally mocking them for failing, suggesting they should get a refund on their hit because it didn't work. It was the ultimate disrespect, turning their murder attempt into a punchline. The streets were buzzing. Who had the audacity to shoot at someone 100 times in broad daylight in another state? The answer came quickly. Within weeks, Charlotte police arrested 3 suspects: Howard Wright, Kevin Thompson, and Derek Bolton. Howard Wright was the key name. He was Yo Gotti's road manager and the vice president of CMG. This wasn't some random street dude. This was Gotti's right-hand man in the music business. Wright was caught running from the scene with an AK-47 and a handgun. The evidence was overwhelming. He eventually pled guilty and got sentenced to over a decade in prison. But Yo Gotti himself was never officially charged. There was no direct evidence linking him to ordering the hit. Legally, he was clean, but in the streets, everyone knew what was up. CMG wanted Dolph dead, and they were willing to travel out of state to make it happen. The fact that it was Gotti's road manager who got caught made it clear this wasn't just street beef. This was coming from the top of the organization. If the Charlotte shooting proved CMG was serious, the Hollywood incident proved they were relentless. They weren't going to stop until Dolph was dead. September 26, 2017, just 7 months after the Charlotte shooting, Dolph was in Los Angeles staying at the Loews Hollywood Hotel. He'd come to LA for business meetings and to work on music. He'd just checked in around 2 p.m. and decided to walk to a nearby shoe palace on Hollywood Boulevard to do some shopping. It was a beautiful California day, and Dolph was moving like he always did. Confident, unbothered, no security, no entourage, just Dolph being Dolph. What he didn't know was that his enemies had tracked him across the country again. As he approached the shoe palace, a gold Cadillac Escalade crept up behind him. 2 men jumped out and opened fire, hitting Dolph multiple times before he could react. Dolph managed to run into the shoe palace, where terrified employees and customers watched him bleeding, trying to get help. Someone called 911, and Dolph was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. This time, the bulletproof car couldn't save him. He'd been on foot. He'd been shot in the buttocks and hip. The injuries were serious, and for a moment, it looked like CMG had finally succeeded. But once again, Dolph survived. He was tough, resilient, and apparently blessed with incredible luck. He spent weeks recovering in the hospital, but he made it through. The suspects crashed the Escalade in the Hollywood Hills and tried to run, but LAPD helicopters tracked them down within minutes. LA doesn't play when it comes to shootings in tourist areas, and they had the resources to catch these guys fast. One of the men arrested was Corey McClendon, a longtime childhood friend of Yo Gotti from Memphis. The pattern was undeniable now. This wasn't random street beef. This wasn't local gang politics. This was an organized, well-funded campaign to eliminate young Dolph, and it was being carried out by people directly connected to Yo Gotti and CMG. They tried in Charlotte. They tried in LA. They were following him across the country, waiting for opportunities, and they weren't going to stop. After 2 years of legal maneuvering, McClendon's charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. The DA said he had a rock-solid alibi, and there were no witnesses or scientific evidence linking him to the shooting. It was a frustrating outcome for Dolph and his team, but not surprising. These cases are hard to prove, especially when the suspects have good lawyers and the witnesses are scared to testify. But the streets knew what was up, and so did Dolph. He knew CMG was hunting him. He knew they had the money and the motivation to keep trying, and he knew that eventually they might succeed. Here's something most people don't know. Someone actually tried to broker peace between Dolph and Gotti, and that someone would later be charged as the mastermind behind Dolph's murder. The irony is almost too much to believe. Hernandez Govan was a street figure from Orange Mound, a neighborhood in South Memphis with deep ties to various gangs and street organizations. Govan had connections on both sides of the beef. He knew people in CMG's circle, and he also had relationships with people close to Dolph and Paper Route Empire. He was the type of dude who could move between different worlds, someone who was respected enough to potentially bring enemies to the table. According to later testimony in Govan's own interviews, he reached out to both camps in 2021. The violence had been going on for years at this point. Bodies were dropping, people were getting arrested.
You know, back in November of 2022, he was arrested and charged with,
The beef was bad for business and bad for Memphis. Govan allegedly called Dolph and tried to set up a sit-down meeting with Gotti to squash the beef once and for all. Yo Gotti was reportedly open to it. By 2021, Gotti had evolved significantly from his street days. He was a legitimate businessman now, with a successful label that had signed major artists like Moneybagg Yo, who was becoming one of the biggest rappers in the country. He'd signed a distribution deal with Interscope Records. He was making real money, building generational wealth. The beef with Dolph was becoming a liability. It brought heat, it brought violence, and it kept his name associated with street drama when he was trying to be seen as a mogul. Gotti had also matured personally. He was in his 40s now, with kids and responsibilities. The street stuff wasn't as appealing as it used to be. If he could squash the beef with Dolph, shake hands, and move forward, it would be good for everyone. They could both make money, both rep Memphis, and stop the cycle of violence that was destroying their city.
You know what I mean? It ain't about Young Dolph, it's about Paper Route Empire. That's my brand. You know what I mean? Like, I got too much time invested in this, too much of my money invested in it.
But Dolph wasn't interested. Not even a little bit. In interviews, Dolph had made his position crystal clear. When asked if he could ever squash his beefs, he said, "Nah, forever. Ain't no stopping. It's up. When it's up, man. It don't stop. We ain't doing it for the culture or nothing. Just is what it is. We gonna be doing it heaven to hell, still jail, however. Just up. It ain't never gonna stop." When pressed further about whether he could ever let things go, Dolph responded, "Nah, I ain't let nothing go. No matter how rich I get, whatever. Just did for life. So sitting down with people is out the question. Yeah, we ain't sitting down. Ain't nothing to talk about. You're wrong. You wrong. So this just what it is." Dolph was too deep in. Too much had happened. They'd tried to kill him in Charlotte, 100 shots. They'd shot him in Hollywood. They'd disrespected him publicly. They'd come to his neighborhood with guns. In Dolph's mind, there was no coming back from that. This wasn't about business anymore. This wasn't about music or money or territory. This was personal. This was about principle. This was about the fact that they'd tried to take his life multiple times, and he couldn't just shake hands and pretend it never happened. There's also another factor that people don't talk about enough: Dolph's pride. His entire brand was built on being unbothered, untouchable, and uncompromising. He'd survived multiple assassination attempts and turned them into album promotions.
Yeah. Shit, the next thing you know, there's footage up online with Dolph performing.
He'd built a successful independent empire without bowing to anyone. If he sat down with Gotti and made peace, it would look like weakness. It would look like he was scared, like he was backing down, and Dolph would rather die than look weak. This decision, this refusal to even consider peace, would prove fatal, because while Dolph was standing on principle, his enemies were planning his execution. Young Dolph loved Memphis. Despite everything, the attempts on his life, the constant threats, the beef that had consumed years of his life, he never abandoned his city. He'd come back regularly, especially around Thanksgiving for his annual turkey giveaway where he'd feed thousands of families in need. It was one of the things that made people love him. He wasn't just a rapper who got rich and left. He stayed connected to his community, gave back, and showed love to the people who'd supported him from the beginning. November 17, 2021 started like any other day. Dolph was in town driving his signature camouflage wrapped Corvette through South Memphis. He'd been posting on social media, letting people know he was home. He'd been visiting family, checking on his businesses, and preparing for the turkey drive that was coming up. Around 12:24 p.m., he pulled into Makita's Cookies on Airways Boulevard, a black-owned bakery he frequented and promoted on social media. Dolph was known for supporting local black businesses, and Makita's was one of his favorites. He'd posted about their cookies multiple times, bringing them customers and attention. What Dolph didn't know was that he'd been tracked. His location had been leaked, his movements had been monitored, and 2 shooters were already on their way, armed and ready to complete the mission they'd been paid to carry out. At 12:30 p.m., a white Mercedes-Benz with a distinctive scratch on the back pulled into the parking lot. The car had been stolen days earlier specifically for this hit. 2 men got out, both armed with high-powered weapons. One carried a Draco, a short-barreled AK-style weapon that's become the gun of choice in street warfare because of its firepower and compact size. The other had a handgun. They were wearing masks, hoodies, and one had a Bass Pro Shop's hat pulled low over his face. Surveillance footage from Makita's Cookies captured everything. The video is grainy but clear enough to see the sequence of events. The shooters ran up to the window of the bakery and opened fire without hesitation. They weren't there to rob him. They weren't there to send a message. They were there to kill him, and they made sure to finish the job. Dolph was hit 22 times, in the head, chest, torso, and back. The medical examiner would later testify that the wounds were catastrophic. Multiple bullets struck vital organs. The headshots alone would have been fatal. There was no chance of survival. This wasn't a shooting, it was an execution. Dolph's brother, who was with him inside the bakery, tried to return fire. He pulled his own weapon and shot back at the attackers, actually hitting one of them. But it was too late. Dolph was already down, bleeding out on the floor of Makita's Cookies, surrounded by the smell of fresh-baked goods and the sound of screaming customers. The shooters jumped back in the white Mercedes and fled the scene. They drove through South Memphis, eventually ditching the car on Bradley Street in Orange Mound. Within hours, Memphis police released photos of the suspects and the getaway car. The images went viral immediately. The city was in shock. Social media exploded with tributes, anger, and calls for justice. Fans gathered outside Makita's, creating a memorial with candles, flowers, and handwritten notes. People were crying, hugging, trying to process what had happened. Young Dolph, the man who'd survived 100 shots, who'd built an empire on independence, who'd given back to his community, was gone at 36 years old. The Memphis police chief held a press conference urging people to stay home. She knew what was coming. She knew that Dolph's people would want revenge. She knew that the streets were about to explode. "We strongly encourage everyone to stay home tonight if you do not have to be out," she said. "There will be extra police presence in many parts of the city." They beefed up security outside Yo Gotti's businesses, expecting bullets to rain down. They created safety zones in South Memphis and North Memphis. They brought in extra officers from surrounding counties. The entire city was on high alert, waiting for the retaliation that everyone knew was inevitable. And the retaliation came fast. Within days, bodies started dropping. The white Mercedes was found abandoned on Bradley Street in Orange Mound, right across from Hernandez Govan's house. That detail alone was suspicious. Why would the shooters ditch the car right in front of a known street figure's house? Either they were incredibly stupid or Govan was involved somehow. Police processed the vehicle and found fingerprints inside belonging to Cornelius Smith and Shundale Barnett. They also found cell phone data that would prove crucial to building the case. The investigation was moving fast because the pressure from the community and the media was intense. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted justice. By January 5th, 2022, police had identified their primary suspect, Justin Johnson, a 23-year-old rapper known as Straight Drop. Johnson was a member of the Truler Mafia gang and had a violent history that made him a perfect candidate for a murder for hire. In 2017, he'd been involved in a bowling alley shooting where he got into a fight, left, came back with an assault rifle, and opened fire through the front doors, hitting multiple people. He'd been charged with aggravated assault but only served 6 months in jail before being released on good behavior. That light sentence had put him back on the streets just in time to be recruited for the Dolph hit. On January 11, 2022, U.S. Marshals captured Johnson in Indiana after a multi-state manhunt. He'd been on the run, moving between different cities, trying to avoid capture. When they finally caught him, he was with another man named Shundale Barnett, who was charged with helping him evade law enforcement. Shortly after Johnson's arrest, Cornelius Smith was arrested in South Haven, Mississippi. Smith was the second shooter, the one who'd been hit by return fire from Dolph's brother during the shooting. He'd been injured but had survived, and now he was facing murder charges that could put him away for life. But the biggest arrest came later. Hernandez Govan, charged as the mastermind who orchestrated the entire hit. According to prosecutors, Govan was the middleman between the people who wanted Dolph dead and the shooters who carried it out. He was the one who recruited Johnson and Smith. He was the one who provided the weapons. He was the one who coordinated the logistics. And he was the one who was supposed to distribute the payment once the job was done. During the trial, Cornelius Smith made the decision to cooperate with prosecutors. He turned state's witness and revealed the entire plot in shocking detail. His testimony painted a picture of a calculated, well-planned assassination that had been in the works for months. According to Smith's testimony, Big Juk, Yo Gotti's brother, had placed a $100,000 bounty on young Dolph's head. But it wasn't just Dolph who had a price on his head. There were bounties on multiple Paper Route Empire members. Key Glock, Dolph's cousin and biggest artist, had a $50,000 bounty. Paper Route Wu, another PRE artist, had a $30,000 bounty. Other PRE artists had $20,000 bounties each. CMG wasn't just trying to kill Dolph, they were trying to dismantle the entire Paper Route Empire organization. Smith explained that Hernandez Govan acted as the middleman between Big Juk and the shooters. Govan had connections on both sides, which made him perfect for the role. He could communicate with Big Juk without raising suspicion, and he could recruit street dudes who were willing to do the hit without asking too many questions. The $100,000 bounty on Dolph was supposed to be split 4 ways. Cornelius Smith would get $40,000. Justin Straight Drop Johnson would get $40,000. Hernandez Govan would get $10,000 for setting it up, and Jamarcus Johnson, Straight Drop's brother, would get $10,000 for helping them escape and providing logistical support. Smith testified that they'd been tracking Dolph for weeks. They knew he came back to Memphis regularly, especially around Thanksgiving for his turkey drive. They knew his patterns, his favorite spots, the places he frequented. They were waiting for the right moment, a time when he'd be vulnerable, when he wouldn't have heavy security, when they could get close enough to guarantee the kill. On November 17th, they got their opportunity. Someone tipped them off that Dolph was at Makita's Cookies. They grabbed the white Mercedes they'd stolen specifically for this purpose, loaded up their weapons, and headed to Airways Boulevard. When they arrived and saw Dolph's camouflage Corvette parked outside, they knew it was time. They jumped out and executed the plan they'd been preparing for weeks. But here's where everything fell apart. Straight Drop ran off with most of the money. Smith testified that he only received $800 of his promised $40,000. First, someone gave him $500. Then later, someone else gave him $300, claiming it was from Justin's folks. That was it. Out of $40,000, he got $800. This betrayal is partly why Smith agreed to testify against everyone. He'd risked his life, caught a murder charge, and gotten shot in the process. All for $800. He felt used, betrayed, and angry. So when prosecutors offered him a deal to cooperate, he took it. He told them everything. The planning, the execution, the people involved, the money trail, all of it. Cell phone records backed up Smith's testimony. They showed constant communication between Govan, Big Juk, and the shooters in the days leading up to the murder. On November 15th, 2 days before the shooting, there were 14 calls between Straight Drop and Cornelius Smith, suggesting they were finalizing the plan. Text messages revealed they were coordinating, discussing logistics, and waiting for the right moment. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a text message where Straight Drop allegedly told CEO Tezzi, another Truler Mafia member, that they needed to spin because someone named Duke had pulled up on Dolph. This suggested they'd been actively hunting Dolph. tracking his movements and communicating with multiple people about his location. The prosecution also presented surveillance footage from Straight Drop's apartment building showing him leaving at 2:58 a.m. on the day of the murder and returning with the white Mercedes that would be used in the shooting. Later footage showed him leaving again around the time of the murder, wearing clothes that matched the description of one of the shooters: black hoodie, gray sweatpants, Bass Pro Shops hat. Perhaps most damning was Straight Drop's own self-snitching through music and social media. Days after the murder, he released a music video for a song called Stepped On, where he was wearing what appeared to be a paper route chain on his waist. Fans and investigators believe this might have been from a previous robbery of PRE artist Big Moochie Grape, who'd been robbed and shot in 2020. Even more reckless, Straight Drop filmed a music video outside the same abandoned house on Bradley Street where the white Mercedes was found. The video was posted on YouTube with hashtags clearly trying to get CMG's attention. It was like he was bragging about the hit, trying to prove himself to the people who'd paid him. Justin Straight Drop Johnson was found guilty on all counts in September 2024 after a 2-week trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, witness testimony, and his own self-incriminating behavior. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 35 years for conspiracy and firearms charges. At 23 years old, he'll likely die behind bars. Cornelius Smith is still awaiting his own trial, but given his cooperation, he'll likely receive a reduced sentence. He's already served as the star witness against Johnson and will probably testify against others as the case continues to unfold. Jamarcus Johnson, Straight Drop's half-brother, pled guilty to accessory after the fact charges in June 2023. He admitted to helping his brother escape, renting him a car, and facilitating 3-way phone calls where they discussed getting paid by someone called Ank, believed to be Big Jook. He was sentenced to a maximum of 12 years. Anthony Big Jook Mims wasn't just Yo Gotti's brother. He was his partner, his protector, and the street muscle behind CMG. While Gotti played the businessman role, shaking hands with executives and negotiating deals, Jook handled the grimmier side of things. He was the enforcer, the one who made sure people respected CMG, the one who handled problems that couldn't be solved with contracts and lawyers. Jook was older than Gotti and had been in the streets longer. He'd seen the worst of Memphis, survived the crack era, and built a reputation as someone you didn't want problems with. When CMG started becoming successful, Jook transitioned from pure street life to being Gotti's business partner. He co-owned businesses like Still Smoking Memphis.
I'm gonna come pay you niggas rent if y'all got somewhere to stay. I'll pay your car note. I'll pay your jewelry note so you won't get repoed.
A lounge and event space. He was involved in the label's operations. He was Gotti's right hand in every sense. But why did Jook want Dolph dead so badly that he'd put up $100,000? Why was he willing to risk everything, his freedom, his brother's career, his family's future, to eliminate one rapper? The disrespect factor can't be overstated. Dolph's diss track, Play With Yo Bitch, didn't just go at Gotti. It specifically mentioned Jook, claiming Dolph used to serve him drugs back in the day. In street culture, that's unforgivable. It's one thing to diss someone's music or their money. It's another thing entirely to claim you were above them in the drug game, that you were their supplier, that they were beneath you in the hierarchy. That kind of disrespect demands a response, and in the streets that response is usually violent. There was also the business threat. Dolph's success as an independent artist was a direct challenge to CMG's entire model. CMG operated like a traditional label. They signed artists, took a percentage of their earnings, and provided resources and infrastructure in return. Dolph proved you didn't need that. He showed that an artist could build their own empire, keep all their money, and still be successful. Every time Dolph won,
you know what I'm saying? You gotta roll it up and put some fire on it. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Every time he sold out a show or dropped a successful project, it undermined CMG's pitch to potential artists. Why sign with CMG when you could do it yourself like Dolph? The ego factor was massive too. Memphis is too small for two kings, and Jook saw Dolph's King of Memphis claims as a direct challenge to his brother's throne. Gotti had fought for years to become the King of Memphis. He'd battled 3 6 Mafia, outlasted other competitors, and finally claimed the crown. Now Dolph was trying to take it, and Jook wasn't going to let that happen. But perhaps the biggest factor was the failed hits. After the Charlotte shooting where they fired 100 shots and missed, after the Hollywood shooting where Dolph survived again, it became personal. They'd invested money, resources, and reputation into killing Dolph. Each failure made them look weak. Each time Dolph survived and mocked them in his music, it was another humiliation. Jook couldn't let it go. He couldn't accept that they'd tried multiple times and failed. He needed Dolph dead, not just for revenge, but to restore CMG's reputation in the streets.
You feel me? Whatever else you renting or leasing, I'm gonna pay this shit. But when this shit break back over, I want 10% of what you make, nigga.
According to testimony, Juk was the one who reached out to Hernandez Govan and set the whole plan in motion. He was the one who put up the $100,000 bounty. He was the one who maintained contact with Straight Drop, communicating with him regularly in the days leading up to the murder. Cell phone records showed they were in direct contact multiple times per day, suggesting Juk was actively involved in coordinating the hit. But here's the twist that changes everything. Paper Route Empire was also trying to kill Yo Gotti. This wasn't one-sided aggression. It was a mutual war where both sides were actively hunting each other. During Hernandez Govan's trial, shocking testimony revealed that young Dolph and Paper Route Empire weren't just defending themselves, they were actively hunting Yo Gotti. This revelation completely reframes the narrative. For years, the story was told as CMG hunting Dolph while he tried to live his life. But the truth was much more complex and much more dangerous. According to court documents and witness testimony, in 2021, before Dolph's murder, there was an attempt on Yo Gotti's life. Shooters allegedly sent by Dolph's camp opened fire on a vehicle they believed Gotti was in. The car was bulletproof, just like Dolph's had been, and Gotti survived without injury.
But today we're breaking down why he was murdered by his old homies from one of the most savage gangs in Memphis.
But the attempt was real, and it showed that PRE was willing to take the war directly to CMG's leadership. There was also the Miami airport incident that's been talked about in street circles for years. According to multiple sources, there was a confrontation at the Miami airport between Key Glock, Dolph's cousin and biggest artist, and Big Juk. The details are disputed, but the most common version of the story claims that Key Glock spit in Juk's face while Dolph watched. Airport security had to intervene to prevent the situation from escalating into violence. If this story is true, it represents one of the most disrespectful acts possible. Spitting in someone's face in public, humiliating them in front of witnesses. That kind of disrespect would demand retaliation in street culture. Hernandez Govan himself addressed this in interviews after his acquittal. He stated, "When Cornelius approached me about this, I thought it was a lie because I'd never heard of Dolph trying to do anything to Gotti. I'd only heard it the other way around, but when I asked Juk about it, he confirmed it. He said Gotti's truck had been shot at and the bulletproof plating had kept him alive. He also said that Dolph had been bragging about sending people to get Gotti, that it was all over the streets." This revelation is crucial because it shows that Big Juk's decision to put a bounty on Dolph wasn't just about old disrespect or ego, it was about survival. From Juk's perspective, Dolph was actively trying to kill his brother. The failed peace talks made it clear Dolph would never stop, so Juk made the decision to strike first, to eliminate the threat before Dolph could succeed in killing Gotti. There were also concerns about PRE members targeting CMG businesses. Big Juk co-owned Still Smoking Memphis, and according to testimony, there were fears that PRE affiliates might target the location. Whether these fears were justified or paranoid, they contributed to the sense that CMG was under siege and needed to act decisively. This reframes the entire narrative. This wasn't just CMG hunting Dolph while he tried to live his life and make music. This was a mutual war where both sides were actively trying to eliminate each other's leadership. The difference is that CMG got to Dolph first. If the roles had been reversed, if Dolph's people had succeeded in killing Gotti before November 17, 2021, we'd be telling a completely different story right now. The streets were that hot. The war was that active. Both sides had shooters on standby, tracking movements, waiting for opportunities. It was only a matter of time before someone succeeded. Unfortunately for Dolph, CMG's shooters got to him first. After Dolph's murder, Memphis became a war zone. The Memphis Police Department literally told citizens to stay home, knowing that retaliation was inevitable. They beefed up security outside Yo Gotti's businesses, created safety zones in high-risk neighborhoods, and brought in extra officers from surrounding counties. The entire city was on high alert, waiting for the violence that everyone knew was coming. And it came fast. Within days, the first body dropped. Darian D. Money Childs was a comedian with ties to CMG and the Fast Cash Boys gang from North Memphis. On November 23, 2021, just 6 days after Dolph's murder, D. Money made a fatal mistake. He posted on Facebook, "Them folks just tried to kill young Dolph. I love Memphis. We so gangster." People immediately took this as D. Money celebrating Dolph's death, and the blowback was swift. He deleted the post, but the damage was done. He followed up with more controversial posts, including one saying people didn't even cry this much when Martin Luther King died, and another joking that the police had arrested his grandma for Dolph's murder. D-Money couldn't leave it alone. The attention was giving him more clout than any of his comedy skits ever had. But on November 23rd, around 10:30 p.m., D-Money pulled into a Valero gas station on North Watkins Road in Frazier, North Memphis. He was with at least one other person when two black SUVs arrived. Gunmen dressed in all black emerged from the vehicles and opened fire, hitting D-Money and two other people. The two others survived, but D-Money died from his injuries. The message was clear: don't celebrate Dolph's death, don't mock him, don't disrespect his memory. If you do, you're a target, regardless of whether you were actually involved in his murder. D-Money's death set the tone for what was to come, a campaign of revenge that would spare no one connected to CMG or the people who killed Dolph. 2 months later, on January 28, 2022, the next target was hit. Big Nukie, whose real name was Xavier Jones, was a 26-year-old rapper signed to Moneybagg Yo's Bread Gang label. He was also a member of the KSBG gang and a cousin of rapper Big 30. Nukie had just finished performing with Big 30 at a local high school event, and afterwards, he headed back to the New Horizon Apartments, which served as KSBG's main headquarters. Around 7 p.m., police responded to calls of gunshots at the apartments. When they arrived, they found Nukie in the parking lot, still sitting in his car, suffering from fatal gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The reason Nukie became a target was his close relationship with Justin Straight Drop Johnson, one of Dolph's killers. Photos online showed both of them posing in front of the same white Corvette, and they'd been childhood friends, both part of the OG Lump Gang clique when they were younger. After Straight Drop was arrested for Dolph's murder, Nukie became guilty by association in the eyes of PRE and their allies. But the situation was more complicated than just revenge for Dolph. Nukie was also caught in the middle of a separate beef between Young Mob, who were aligned with PRE, and KSBG, who were aligned with CMG through Moneybagg Yo. Young Mob's leader, Stupid Duke, had just been released from prison after 9 years and was ready to reclaim his position as a kingpin in South Memphis. Duke had major problems with Moneybagg Yo for doing a song with Fast Cash Jizzle, who'd allegedly killed Young Mob member Young Key back in 2013. In Duke's mind, that was unforgivable, and anyone associated with Moneybagg Yo was an enemy. According to rumors, Nukie wasn't just a rapper, he was active in the streets. Big 30 would later rap that Nukie had almost 9 kills, suggesting he was a serious player in the gang war. There were also rumors that Nukie had been involved in shootouts with Young Mob, including one at a barbershop in 2021, and that he'd even shot Stupid Duke in the leg during one of these confrontations. So when Nukie was killed, it was both revenge for his connection to Straight Drop and part of the larger war between Young Mob and KSBG. His death devastated his family and friends. Moneybagg Yo changed his profile picture to Nukie and posted tributes. Big 30 was heartbroken, having lost his cousin and close friend. But in the streets, Nukie's death was celebrated by Young Mob and PRE affiliates as another successful hit. 5 months later, on June 14, 2023, another major target was eliminated. CEO Tezzy, whose real name was Joshua Taylor, was a high-ranking member of Truller Mafia and one of the best friends of the gang's late leader, J Money. Tezzy had been named as a person of interest in Dolph's murder investigation, though he was never formally charged. Around 1 p.m., police responded to a call about a body found in a car on Spotswood Avenue in Orange Mound. When they arrived, they discovered Tezzy had been shot to death. According to neighbors, he'd actually been killed the night before, and his body had been sitting in the car for hours before being discovered. Tezzy's death sparked multiple theories. Some believed it was PRE getting revenge for Dolph, taking out one of the people who'd helped orchestrate the hit. Others believed Tezzy was killed by his own people to prevent him from snitching. His name had appeared on the witness list for the Dolph case, which made some people in Truller Mafia nervous. If Tezzy decided to cooperate with prosecutors to save himself, he could bring down the entire organization, including potentially implicating Big Jook directly. Hernandez Govan would later address this in interviews, downplaying his relationship with Tezzy and suggesting that things had changed between them. When pressed about their close friendship, Govan said, "How can that be my little bro when his name was on the witness list?" The implication was clear. Tezzy had betrayed the organization by potentially cooperating with law enforcement, and that betrayal may have cost him his life. In September 2022, another death connected to the case made headlines. Lot Cash Desto, whose real name was Destiny Govan, was a 25-year-old rapper signed to Lil Uzi Vert's label. She was also the daughter of Hernandez Govan, the alleged mastermind behind Dolph's murder. Desto was shot and killed in Houston during what police described as a botched robbery attempt. According to reports, 2 men approached her vehicle and opened fire. Desto shot back, hitting one of the assailants in the abdomen, but she died from her injuries. The timing of her death, coming just months after her father was indicted for Dolph's murder, raised questions about whether it was connected to the Memphis War. Desto had been affiliated with Truller Mafia and had made music with J Money back in 2015. Some speculated that PRE had reached all the way to Houston to get revenge on Govan by targeting his daughter. However, Govan himself would later explain in interviews that his daughter's death had nothing to do with the Dolph case. He said she was targeted because of expensive jewelry that Lil Uzi Vert had given her to boost her profile. Robbers had seen her at a Houston club, recognized the jewelry was real because of her association with Uzi, and followed her when she left. It was a robbery gone wrong, not a hit connected to Memphis street politics. On August 18, 2023, another body dropped that sent shockwaves through the CMG camp. Tamanuel Benson, the brother of rapper Black Youngsta, was shot and killed at a BP gas station in South Memphis around 9:30 a.m. Black Youngsta, you'll remember, was the CMG artist who'd pulled up to Dolph's neighborhood with guns in 2016, threatening him and escalating the beef to violence. He'd also been arrested in connection with the Charlotte shooting, where 100 shots were fired at Dolph, though those charges were eventually dropped. The shooter who killed Tamanuel wasn't even masked. Police released a clear image of the suspect, and Randy Ewing was later arrested and charged with the murder. The boldness of the hit, in broad daylight at a gas station with no attempt to hide his identity, suggested this was a message killing. The shooter wanted people to know who did it and why. It was direct retaliation for Black Youngsta's role in the beef with Dolph. Black Youngsta was devastated. He'd lost his brother to a war that he'd helped escalate years earlier. The pain and anger were evident in his social media posts, but there was nothing he could do. The cycle of revenge had claimed another victim, and it showed no signs of stopping. On May 28, 2022, another KSBG member was killed. Cheese Dollar, whose real name was Jasper Strickland, was a 30-year-old rapper who'd been releasing music for several years. Around 6:30 p.m., Cheese Dollar and 2 friends were sitting in a car at a McDonald's on East Shelby Drive when they were ambushed by 2 shooters. Cheese Dollar was killed, and one of his friends was injured but survived. The police eventually cracked the case and arrested 2 young mob members, Mohamed Moski Samba and Quentin Moss. Both were charged with murder, and the case is still working its way through the courts. But the message was clear. Young Mob was actively hunting KSBG members, and they weren't going to stop until they'd avenged every slight and every loss. On October 26, 2023, the violence came back around to Young Mob. Big Mo, whose real name was Jiren Rutherford, was a Young Mob rapper who'd been making music and building a following. Around 9 p.m., Big Mo and another Young Mob member named TJ were driving in a black Nissan Maxima on Chula Road when a car pulled up beside them and opened fire. More than a dozen rounds were fired, hitting both men. Their car crashed into a tree, and TJ was pronounced dead at the scene. Big Mo was rushed to the hospital in critical condition but died the following day. The timing of the double murder, coming just one day after KSBG member Big Grape was killed, suggested this was immediate retaliation. The war between Young Mob and KSBG had become so intense that bodies were dropping within 24 hours of each other. Neither side was willing to let a death go unanswered. On February 10, 2023, one of the most tragic deaths occurred. J.R. Splat, whose real name was Lorian Smith, was only 15 years old. He was a KSBG member and the little brother of Baby Migo. Around midnight, someone walked up to his yard on Kirkwood Road and opened fire, killing the teenager in his own home. The murder of a 15-year-old showed just how out of control the violence had become. Kids were being killed. Teenagers were being targeted. The war had consumed an entire generation of young people in Memphis, and there seemed to be no end in sight. CEO Jizzle from Double R, who was aligned with PRE, posted cryptic messages after J.R. Splat's death, suggesting he might have been involved. In his song Step Brothers 2, Jizzle rapped about ops who couldn't afford tombstones and who lived short lives. Lyrics that seemed to fit J.R. Splat perfectly, as there was a public funeral fund started for him after his death. But rumors also circulated that J.R. Splat had been backdoored by his own friends over a dispute about a gun. One of his alleged killers, known as J-Bug, would himself be killed in April 2025 before even turning 18 years old. The cycle of violence was consuming everyone involved, regardless of which side they were on. On June 8, 2024, another teenager was killed. Jayhawk, whose real name was Javant Newsom, was a 17-year-old KSBG and Chopper Gang member. He was shot and killed in the West Haven neighborhood. CEO Jizzle posted after the murder that God don't play about Jizzle, suggesting he was involved or at least celebrating the death. The reason for the targeting became clearer when people remembered that Jayhawk had allegedly shot Jizzle at a Lil Baby concert in September 2023. Jizzle had been injured in that shooting, and now, 9 months later, Jayhawk was dead. It was another example of the endless cycle of revenge that had taken over Memphis. The body count kept rising. Young Mob, aligned with PRE, was sliding on KSBG and CMG-affiliated gangs. The retaliation was relentless. Memphis had become the murder capital of America, with a homicide rate 3 times higher than Chicago and 9 times higher than Los Angeles. The violence wasn't just affecting gang members. Innocent people were getting caught in the crossfire. Families were being destroyed and an entire city was living in fear. But the biggest target was still out there. Big Jook, the man who'd allegedly orchestrated Dolph's murder. And PRE was hunting him. January 13, 2024. Big Jook and Yo Gotti attended the funeral of their uncle, Eric Boven, a legendary Memphis kingpin from the 1980s and 90s. Boven had run the Boven Organization, one of the city's largest drug operations, and was a respected figure in Memphis street history. His death brought together family members from across the country, including Gotti and Jook, who'd both looked up to their uncle as a role model in their younger days. The funeral was held at a church in Memphis, and it was a major event. Hundreds of people attended to pay their respects. Video footage from the service shows Gotti and Jook approaching the casket together, saying their final goodbyes to the man who'd influenced their lives so profoundly. After the funeral, there was a repast scheduled at Perron's Restaurant and Event Center on Winchester Road. This was supposed to be a time for family to gather, share memories, and support each other. Yo Gotti left early to handle other business, but Big Jook decided to stay and spend time with family. According to YouTube journalist Seti Nash, who claims to have sources close to the situation, 2 men in all black were spotted sitting in the back of the church during the funeral. They were scoping out Big Jook, watching his movements, studying his security. When they saw him, they left early and waited outside, preparing for their opportunity. That morning, Big Jook had posted on Instagram, "Stay alert to stay alive. Watch your back at all times." It was an ominous message that suggested he knew something was coming. He'd been living with the knowledge that he was a target ever since Dolph's murder. He knew PRE wanted revenge. He knew his name was at the top of their hit list. But he couldn't hide forever. He had to attend his uncle's funeral. He had to be there for his family. Around 4:15 p.m., as Big Jook sat in his vehicle outside Perron's, a white Ford Explorer with no license plates and dark tinted windows pulled up. According to reports, Big Jook's mother was in the car with him, sitting in the back seat. Jook was in the front, possibly on his phone or talking to someone. He never saw it coming. The shooters opened fire without warning. Multiple shots rang out, hitting Big Jook repeatedly. His mother managed to escape the vehicle and run to safety, miraculously avoiding being hit. Another person in the car was also shot but survived. But Big Jook took the brunt of the attack. He was hit multiple times in vital areas. Big Jook was rushed to St. Francis Hospital, but the injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. At 43 years old, Yo Gotti's brother, business partner, and the alleged mastermind behind Young Dolph's murder was gone. The white Ford Explorer sped away from the scene. Surveillance footage captured it fleeing, and police released images asking for the public's help in identifying the vehicle and the suspects. But to this day, no arrests have been made. The case remains open, and the killers are still out there. The streets immediately connected Jook's murder to Dolph. It was too perfect, too poetic. Jook had allegedly put up $100,000 to have Dolph killed. Now, just over 2 years later, he was dead himself. Killed in almost the exact same way. Ambushed in a vehicle, shot multiple times, no chance of survival. Paper Route Empire members celebrated openly on social media. Grove Hero, a comedian affiliated with PRE, went on Instagram Live and could barely contain his joy. "Today feel good as hell," he said, using coded language to celebrate Jook's death. The Dolphins won today, using dolphins as a reference to Dolph. The message was clear. This was get back for young Dolph, and they wanted everyone to know it. Paper Route Wu posted mocking messages. CEO Lil Kenny from Young Mob performed a freestyle where he rapped about someone's brother getting killed in front of their mother with a fat stomach, clear references to Juke and the circumstances of his death. The disrespect was intentional and brutal. They wanted CMG to feel the same pain that PRE had felt when Dolph was killed. The irony of Juke being killed at a funeral wasn't lost on anyone. He'd come to pay respects to a dead family member and ended up becoming one himself. The shooters had shown no respect for the sanctity of the funeral, no concern for the other family members present, no hesitation about killing a man in front of his mother. It was cold, calculated, and ruthless, exactly the kind of hit that Juke himself had allegedly ordered on Dolph. Here's the tragic irony. If Big Juke had lived, he almost certainly would have been convicted for orchestrating young Dolph's murder. The evidence against him was substantial and growing stronger every day as the investigation continued. The cell phone records alone were damning. They showed constant communication between Juke and Justin Straight Drop Johnson in the days and weeks leading up to Dolph's murder. They were in direct contact multiple times per day, sometimes having conversations that lasted several minutes. On November 15th, just 2 days before the murder, there were 14 calls between Straight Drop and Cornelius Smith, suggesting they were finalizing the plan. And throughout this period, Juke was in regular contact with both shooters. The money trail was another major piece of evidence. Cornelius Smith's testimony revealed that Juke was the source of the $100,000 bounty on Dolph's head. Straight Drop's brother, Jamarcus Johnson, testified about three-way calls where they discussed payment from someone called Ank, a nickname believed to refer to Big Juke. The prosecution was building a case that showed Juke wasn't just aware of the plot, he was funding it and coordinating it. The connections between Juke and the conspirators were well documented. Photos and videos showed Juke with Hernandez Govan, the alleged middleman. There were pictures of Juke with CEO Tezzi, another Truller Mafia member connected to the case. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were people Juke had relationships with, people he could call on to handle street business. The motive was clear and well established. Juke had publicly disrespected Dolph after his death, showing no remorse or sympathy. He'd mocked Dolph's murals, calling them disrespectful to real street legends. He'd posted videos offering to pay PRE artists' bills in what was clearly a thinly veiled diss, suggesting they were broke without Dolph. This behavior showed consciousness of guilt. He was celebrating Dolph's death because he'd been involved in making it happen. The witness testimony was piling up. Cornelius Smith had directly named Big Juke as the person who put the hit out. Jamarcus Johnson had corroborated parts of the story. As the case progressed, more people were cooperating with prosecutors, and more evidence was coming to light that pointed directly at Juke. Legal experts following the case believed Juke would have been indicted within months. The feds were building a RICO case against the entire organization, and Juke was at the top of the pyramid. They were connecting the dots between the bounty, the coordination, the payment, and the execution. It was only a matter of time before they had enough to bring charges. But street justice moved faster than the legal system. Juke was killed before he could ever face trial, before he could be arrested, before he could even be formally named as a suspect. In a way, his death saved Yo Gotti from having to watch his brother go to prison for life, or worse, having his own name dragged deeper into the case as prosecutors investigated CMG's involvement. The question that haunts many people is, did Yo Gotti know? Was he aware that his brother had put a bounty on Dolph's head? Did he approve it, or was Juke acting independently? These questions may never be answered. Gotti has never been charged with anything, and there's no public evidence linking him directly to the murder plot. But the fact remains that his brother, his business partner, the person he trusted most in the world, allegedly orchestrated one of the most high-profile murders in hip-hop history. As of 2025, the Memphis War continues to evolve, though the landscape has changed dramatically. The major players have either been killed, arrested, or forced underground. But the violence hasn't stopped. It's just taken on new forms and new targets. Justin Straight Drop Johnson is serving life in prison plus 35 years. He was found guilty on all counts in September 2024 after a 2-week trial where the evidence against him was overwhelming. Surveillance footage showed him at the scene. Cell phone records placed him there at the exact time of the murder. His own self-snitching through music videos and social media posts sealed his fate. At 23 years old, he'll likely die behind bars, never experiencing freedom again. His entire adult life will be spent in a cell, paying for 6 minutes of violence that earned him only $800 of the $40,000 he was promised. Cornelius Smith is awaiting his own trial, but he's already cooperated extensively as a witness against Johnson and others. His testimony was crucial in securing Johnson's conviction, and he'll likely testify in future trials as well. In exchange for his cooperation, prosecutors will probably offer him a reduced sentence, though he's still facing significant time. The betrayal he felt, risking his life and catching a murder charge for only $800, drove him to flip on everyone involved. He's now a marked man in the streets, someone who'll need protective custody for the rest of his life because he's labeled a snitch. Jamarcus Johnson, Straight Drop's half-brother, pled guilty to accessory after the fact charges in June 2023. He admitted to helping his brother escape, renting him a car, and facilitating communication between the conspirators. He was sentenced to a maximum of 12 years, though he could be released earlier with good behavior. His cooperation and willingness to testify against his own brother likely helped reduce his sentence. Hernandez Govan was acquitted in August 2025 after a controversial trial that shocked many observers. Despite Cornelius Smith's detailed testimony naming him as the middleman who orchestrated the hit, despite the cell phone records showing his communication with the shooters, despite the white Mercedes being found right outside his house, the jury found the evidence insufficient for conviction. The acquittal was controversial because many people believed the evidence was strong enough, but the prosecution couldn't definitively prove that Govan had coordinated the hit or that he'd received money for his role. Without that direct proof, the jury had reasonable doubt. Since his acquittal, Govan has done interviews on major platforms like Vlad TV and No Jumper, claiming his innocence and explaining his side of the story. He said he's leaving Memphis because the city is too dangerous for him now. Both sides see him as a target, PRE because they believe he helped kill Dolph, and CMG because they might think he's cooperating with authorities or could flip in the future. Govan's life will never be the same, regardless of the acquittal. In July 2024, the feds dropped a massive indictment on Young Mob, the gang that had been aligned with Paper Route Empire throughout the war. 15 people were charged with drug trafficking and firearm offenses in the initial indictment. Then in July 2025, 8 Young Mob members, including their leader, Stupid Duke, were hit with a RICO indictment that detailed the gang's structure, rivalries, and violent acts dating back to 2007. Stupid Duke, whose real name is Brian Lackland, is facing multiple charges including the attempted robbery of rapper Tripstar that left Young Mob member Rolo dead. He's also charged in connection with the murder of KSBG rapper Cheese Dollar. The RICO indictment paints Duke as the leader of a violent criminal enterprise responsible for numerous murders, robberies, and drug trafficking operations. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. Other Young Mob members facing charges include Big Paul, who's charged in the Tripstar case, Mosky and Quentin Moss, who are charged with murdering Cheese Dollar, and Rody P, who's charged with various drug and weapons offenses. The feds are systematically dismantling Young Mob, using wiretaps, surveillance, and cooperating witnesses to build their case. An interesting piece of evidence that emerged from the Young Mob investigation was a 91-page affidavit that detailed their activities. According to this document, in March 2024, Stupid Duke was casually having a phone call with one of his hitters who told Duke that members of Pooh Shiesty's Chopper Gang were hanging out on a street corner. The hitter was essentially asking Duke's permission to slide on them, and Duke appeared to agree. Police intercepted this communication and sent officers to the location before anything could happen, potentially preventing another murder. The affidavit also included somewhat humorous surveillance photos of Duke taking out the trash while openly carrying a huge gun, showing that he was never caught lacking and always prepared for his enemies to strike. In August 2025, the violence continued with another high-profile death. Fast Cash C-Money, whose real name was Courtney Smith, was killed in one of the most insane shootouts Memphis had ever seen. Around midnight on August 10th, police were called to the suburbs area of Macaulay Drive and Macaulay Cove in North Memphis. When they arrived, they found several houses that had been struck by gunfire. Security cameras captured the shootout, and the footage is terrifying. It sounds like a literal war zone. Switch after switch going off, dozens of rounds being fired in rapid succession. 2 vehicles were engaged in a running gun battle, with shooters from both cars blasting away at each other. Eventually, one car reversed out of the situation and the second car followed, either chasing them or fleeing the scene. Police found C Money's body at the intersection of Maritavia Street and Georgian Drive, about half a mile from the initial shooting location. He was 29 years old and had been in the Memphis rap scene for over a decade. He was affiliated with CMG and had old beef with Young Mob dating back to 2013 when he was charged with murdering Young Mob member Young Key, though he was later acquitted. The theories about who killed C Money vary. Some blame Young Mob, given their long history of beef. Others point to internal CMG conflicts or suggest it might have been related to a separate incident that happened the day before on the same street. There were rumors that CMG rapper Lil Migo, who was friends with C Money, had called him for help, fearing he was about to be robbed. C Money allegedly arrived to help his friend, which led to the shootout that claimed his life. Days after C Money's death, a vigil was held in his honor. But even the vigil turned violent when 3 masked and armed men arrived at the location, leading to a police chase. The 3 men, Tyron Perkins, Derek Walton, and Khaled New, were arrested. However, it turned out that at least one of them, Khaled New, was actually a Fast Cash affiliate known as NFC GSKY, suggesting these were friends coming to pay respects rather than enemies trying to disrupt the vigil. The gang alliances in Memphis have become incredibly complex and fluid. On the PRE Alliance side, you have Young Mob, Double R, Goon Squad Mafia, and remnants of Truler Mafia. On the CMG Alliance side, you have KSBG, Chopper Gang, Fast Cash Boys, and Fam Mob. But even these alliances aren't solid. Big Scar from Double R was cousins with Pooh Shiesty from Chopper Gang, creating cross-gang family ties. KSBG had internal splits after Dolph's death because some members were childhood friends with Straight Drop but aligned with PRE. The beef has splintered into so many sub-beefs that it's hard to track who's beefing with who anymore. Young Mob is beefing with KSBG, Double R is beefing with Truler Mafia, Fast Cash is beefing with Young Mob, Chopper Gang is beefing with YNR, a Truler Mafia affiliate. It's a tangled web of rivalries that all trace back to the original CMG versus PRE war but have taken on lives of their own. Yo Gotti has largely stayed silent publicly throughout all of this. He's never been charged with anything related to Dolph's murder or the subsequent violence. He's continued building CMG into a powerhouse label, signing artists like Glorilla who've become major stars. He's maintained his business empire, opening restaurants and investing in real estate. From the outside, he looks like a successful businessman who's moved past the street life, but privately he's lost his brother, seen his artists killed, and watched his city tear itself apart. Some speculate he's cooperating with authorities to end the violence, providing information that could help solve cases and prevent future murders. Others believe he's simply insulated himself from the streets, letting the war rage on while he focuses on legitimate business. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Paper Route Empire has struggled without Dolph. Key Glock has tried to carry the torch, releasing music and keeping Dolph's memory alive. But he's also dealt with his own legal issues and the trauma of losing his cousin. Other PRE artists like Paper Route Woo, Big Moochie Grape, and Snoopy Bands continue making music, but the label's momentum has slowed significantly. Without Dolph's leadership, vision, and star power, PRE isn't the force it once was. Daddy-O, Dolph's business partner and the man who allegedly helped finance PRE from the beginning, has largely stayed out of the public eye. There are rumors he's still orchestrating moves behind the scenes, coordinating with Young Mob and other PRE allies to continue the war. But nothing has been confirmed, and Daddy-O has been smart enough to keep his name out of legal documents and police investigations. The Memphis Police Department has increased patrols in South Memphis and North Memphis hotspots. They've created safety zones at certain housing projects where known gang members are prohibited from gathering. The FBI has gotten involved, particularly with the Young Mob RICO case, bringing federal resources to bear on the problem. But the reality is they're overwhelmed. Memphis had 302 homicides in 2021, 346 in 2022, and 359 in 2023, making it the murder capital of America per capita. The Dolph-related violence is just one piece of a larger crisis. The city is struggling with poverty, lack of economic opportunity, failing schools, and a culture of violence that's been passed down through generations. Arresting a few gang members isn't going to solve the underlying problems. When you step back and look at the full scope of this beef, the Big Nukie, a 26-year-old rapper with a promising career, was killed because of his childhood friendship with one of Dolph's murderers. CEO Teezy, a high-ranking gang member who might have helped orchestrate the hit, was found dead in his car, possibly killed by his own people to keep him quiet. Lot Cash Desto, a 25-year-old female rapper and daughter of the alleged mastermind, was killed in Houston in what may or may not have been connected to the Memphis War. Tamanuel Benson, Black Youngsta's brother, was executed at a gas station in broad daylight as payback for his brother's role in the beef. Cheese Dollar, a 30-year-old rapper trying to make it in the industry, was ambushed at McDonald's. Big Mo and TJ, two young mob members, were shot and killed together, their car crashing into a tree. J.R. Splat, only 15 years old, was killed in his own yard, a child caught up in adult beef. Jay Hawk, 17 years old, was killed before he could even graduate high school. Fast Cash C Money, 29 years old and a veteran of the Memphis rap scene, died in a wild shootout that sounded like a war zone. And these are just the high-profile deaths. Countless others whose names never made the news have also lost their lives in this war. The lives destroyed extend beyond just the dead. Justin Johnson is 23 years old and will spend the rest of his life in prison, never experiencing freedom, never having a family, never fulfilling whatever potential he might have had. Cornelius Smith is facing decades behind bars and will live the rest of his life as a marked man, labeled a snitch needing protective custody to survive. Stupid Duke and 7 other young mob members are facing RICO charges that could put them away for life, dismantling an entire organization and leaving dozens of families without fathers, brothers, and sons. Children are growing up without their fathers, watching their role models get killed or locked up, learning that violence is the only way to solve problems. An entire city has been traumatized, living in fear, unable to feel safe in their own neighborhoods. The financial cost is enormous, too. The $100,000 bounty on Dolph's head was just the beginning. There are millions in legal fees as defendants hire expensive lawyers to fight murder charges and RICO indictments. There's lost music revenue. Dolph was making millions per year, and that income stream is gone forever. Key Glock and other PRE artists have seen their careers stalled by the violence and legal issues. The economic impact on Memphis's music scene is incalculable. How many artists have left the city because it's too dangerous? How many potential stars have been killed before they could reach their potential? How many investors and industry executives are avoiding Memphis because of its reputation for violence? And for what? Because Young Dolph didn't want to sign a record deal? Because egos couldn't coexist in the same city? Because disrespect had to be answered with bullets? The tragic truth is that both Dolph and Gotti were right in their own ways. Dolph was right to protect his independence. It's what made him special. What made him an inspiration to independent artists everywhere. Gotti was right to build an empire and try to bring Memphis artists together under one umbrella, creating opportunities and infrastructure that could benefit everyone. But somewhere along the way, business became personal. Competition became hatred, and hatred became a body count that Memphis will be dealing with for generations. The cycle of revenge has consumed everyone involved, and it shows no signs of stopping. Even with Dolph gone, even with Big Jook gone, even with people locked up and facing life sentences, the war continues. New beefs have sprouted from the original conflict. Young Mob versus KSBG, Double R versus Truler Mafia. Fast Cash versus Young Mob, it's like a hydra, cut off one head and 2 more grow back. Young Dolph once said, "When it's up, it ain't never going to stop." He was right. Even with him gone, the war he was part of continues to rage. Because in Memphis, the streets have a long memory, and the cycle of revenge doesn't end until everyone involved is either dead or in prison. The deadly Memphis war between CMG and Paper Route Empire isn't just a rap beef, it's a cautionary tale about pride, loyalty, and the cost of violence. It's a reminder that in the streets, there are no winners, only survivors. And even the survivors are left traumatized, looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next attack. Rest in peace to Young Dolph, Big Jook, and everyone who lost their lives in this senseless war. May their deaths serve as a warning to the next generation that this path only leads to destruction. If you made it this far, drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you think this beef will ever truly end? Could it have been avoided if Dolph had just sat down with Gotti and talked it out? Or was it inevitable given the culture of Memphis and the personalities involved? And what do you think happens next? Will the violence continue, or will the arrests and deaths finally bring some peace to the city? Hit that subscribe button because we're going to keep covering this story as it develops. The trials aren't over, the streets are still active, and the truth is still coming out. There are more indictments coming, more trials scheduled, and unfortunately probably more violence on the horizon. Inside the deadly beef between OT7 Kwani and Skrilla, and before a single shot was fired, before a single diss record dropped, before any of the no-jumper call-outs or the Instagram threats or the street warnings, these two men were actually in the studio together, recording music, as peers, almost as allies. Let that sit for a second. The same two rappers who would go on to represent one of the most personal, most heated, most dangerous feuds in Philadelphia drill history had already made a song together. A song that to this day has never officially dropped. And the reason it never came out? According to Kwani himself, he completely bodied Skrilla on the track. Outperformed him so badly that releasing it would have been an embarrassment. At least that is the story Kwani told the internet when he decided to light the fuse publicly. And the response from Skrilla? He went on No Jumper, sat across from Adam Tutu with zero hesitation, and questioned Kwani's entire reputation. Not just the rap beef. The man's background, his street credentials. Everything people had been saying about who Kwani really was, Skrilla put all of that under a microscope and said he did not believe it. Then he said he wanted to see Kwani face to face, not on wax. In person. But here's where the story gets genuinely strange. Right when it looked like this beef was about to explode into something that could not be undone, when the fans were choosing sides, when the streets were watching, when the whole city of Philadelphia was locked in, Kwani jumped on Instagram and told everybody the beef was fake. Said they had music dropping soon. The internet is collectively called cap. Nobody bought it for even a second. But then something happened behind closed doors that nobody has ever fully explained publicly, and the public fireworks just stopped. Then Skrilla's track Doot Doot 6-7 got uploaded anonymously to TikTok and within months was in over 126,000 videos. Kwani signed to 10K Projects, the label home of Ice Spice and Trippie Redd, for what people were saying was a massive deal. And just like that, the loudest beef in Philly drill went completely quiet. But quiet does not mean dead. And in Philadelphia, nothing ever truly disappears. As recently as just weeks ago, the drama was still flickering. Lil Bucks from CCK, sitting on a firearm case, found the time to jump on Instagram and call Skrilla out publicly. And the deeper you dig into this story, into the crews, the alliances, the people who lost their lives inside these circles, the clearer it becomes that this was never just a rap beef. This was a collision between two worlds, two reputations, and one city that does not forgive disloyalty. Tonight, we are going all the way in. Every layer, every betrayal, every dead homie and broken alliance that led to that moment in the No Jumper studio. This is the real story of OT7 Kwani and Skrilla. To understand this beef, you have to understand the city it was born in. Philadelphia is not a monolithic place. You can walk 10 blocks in Philadelphia and go from one world into a completely different one. North Philly, Kensington, West Philly, South Philly, these are not just zip codes. They are distinct ecosystems with their own codes, their own hierarchies, their own economies, and their own histories of violence. The people who come up in these neighborhoods do not just grow up hard. They grow up in environments where the wrong association, the wrong block, the wrong person standing next to you in a photo can redefine your entire life overnight. By 22, Philadelphia's drill scene was in a full eruption. A new generation of rappers had emerged who sounded like nothing that had come out of the city before. Not the Meek Mill Arena rap era, not the older boom bap tradition. This was something newer, darker, and stranger. The beats were eerie, slowed down, almost hypnotic. The lyrics were street raw and direct. The energy felt like the city itself was making music, like the trauma and the tension and the paranoia of living in those neighborhoods had finally found a sonic form. And right at the center of that new wave were two names that kept coming up in the same breath. OT7 Kwani out of the Richard Allen Projects in North Philly, and Skrilla out of Kensington. Two men, two very different corners of the same suffering city, and for a brief, strange moment in time, both of them were moving in the same direction, until the thing that connected them became the thing that tore them apart. To really feel the weight of this story, you have to understand what these neighborhoods actually are. The Richard Allen Projects, where Kwani grew up, have been one of the most historically significant and most dangerous public housing developments in Philadelphia's history. Generations of families have grown up in those buildings, navigating poverty, gang activity, and street violence as daily realities. It is the kind of place where you learn very early that survival is not guaranteed, and where the decisions you make at 13 years old can define the rest of your life. Kensington, where Skrilla is from, carries its own weight. For years, national media has called it the epicenter of America's opioid crisis. Open-air drug markets, extreme poverty, an overdose rate that makes national headlines regularly. The people who grow up there grow up watching the worst of what addiction and desperation can do to a community, and they either get swallowed by it or they find a way to document it. Skrilla chose documentation, and the result was music that sounded like Kensington in a way nothing else ever had. This is the context inside which both of these men built their careers and built their beefs. Not the rap industry, not social media fame. The streets. The actual streets. And that context is what makes every layer of this story hit differently than a typical rap feud. Let us talk about OT7 Kwani first. Government name Jaquan Borneo Lee. Born June 20th, 1997 in North Philadelphia. He grew up in the Richard Allen Projects, and by his own account, he was jumping off the porch, getting into adult street situations by the time he was 13 years old. That is not a boast. That is just what life looked like in that environment. You did not get to choose when the streets came for you. You only got to choose how you responded. Kwani had multiple run-ins with the law before music became his focus. He did time, came home, and channeled everything he had survived into the booth. His entry into the rap game came around 2002, when he appeared on a track called Halftime by Lil Bucks. Yes, the same Lil Bucks who would later become a central figure in the drama around this beef. That feature gave him early underground buzz. His solo debut, Virgil 2, dropped in March 2021, and the people who were paying attention immediately recognized that this was something different. Then in 2002, Kwani dropped Dior Dior and everything shifted. The sound was dark and immediate and unmistakably Philly. Fans in the city started paying attention in a serious way, and his biggest record, Dog Talk, eventually accumulated over 5 million YouTube views and 8 million Spotify streams, numbers that established him as one of the most significant voices in Philadelphia's underground. He was not just a rapper from the projects, he was becoming the rapper from the projects, the one who was going to carry that energy to a national stage. The OT7 in his name carries real meaning. It is a declaration of loyalty to his crew, to his block, to a set of relationships and obligations that existed long before any record deal. That kind of identity does not disappear when the music starts popping. It travels with you into every collaboration, every beef, every public statement. When you understand what OT7 means to Kwani, you understand why the who started the new wave argument was not just a music industry debate to him. It was about whose credibility was real. He is also a father, and in interviews he has spoken about how fatherhood changed the direction his life was heading. He made headlines for bringing money back to his housing projects to show younger people from his neighborhood that success was possible. He signed with 10K Projects in April 2024, the same label as Ice Spice and Trippie Redd, in what was widely reported as a major deal. He performed at Rolling Loud, California in 2024. By every measure of the rap game, Kwani was on the rise. Now let us talk about Skrilla. Born Jamil Edwards, June 3, 1999, in Kensington, Philadelphia. His mother is Mexican and from Texas. His father is African American and from Philly. That mixed background gave him a perspective on identity and belonging that shows up constantly in his music, an outsider's eye on a world he was raised inside of. He started selling drugs around age 12. By his teenage years, he was facing heroin-related charges. He spent 2.5 years under house arrest while still in high school, meaning his formative years, the years when most kids are worrying about grades and sports and social lives, Skrilla was ankle monitored and legally restricted in his own neighborhood. He also had early dreams of becoming a fashion designer and was involved in community activism before the streets fully claimed his time. Those layers matter because they explain the complexity of who Skrilla is. He is not a one-dimensional street rapper. He has always been more than that. His entry into rap came through his childhood friend Recco Havoc, who inspired him to start making music. He recorded Dog Food as his very first song and dropped his debut single Green Snake in 2018. For the next few years, he was grinding in the underground, building an audience, developing a sound, figuring out who he was as an artist. Then he found his producer Mambo, who was based out of Rome, and something clicked. The beats Mambo was making were unlike anything in Philly at the time. Dark, woozy, almost hallucinogenic, like Kensington itself had been turned into sound. Skrilla also practices Santeria, a syncretic religion rooted in West African traditions that found its way to the Caribbean and then to the Americas. That spiritual practice is not a gimmick or a persona. It shapes how he moves, how he thinks, and how his music feels. There is a ritual quality to his best work that separates him from every other rapper in his city. Combined with his Kensington upbringing and his genuinely dangerous early life, that spiritual dimension gives his music a texture that hits on multiple levels simultaneously. In 2022, he dropped the project Cutthroat. This was the tape that put the city on notice, The beats were strange and dark and instantly distinctive. On tracks like Block High, he rapped, "You ain't got to act hard. We wasn't raised the same. Have you laid up in the dock? You can't even move the same. Can't even eat the same. Shitty bag, zipper on your stomach. You ain't never think you could get tapped, but we did it." The energy on that project was gritty, intense, and deeply personal, and Philadelphia's underground responded immediately. The buzz started spreading through the city fast. So by the end of 2022, you had two artists, both from unforgiving Philadelphia environments, both making dark, eerie drill music, both rising in the underground simultaneously. From the outside, they looked like natural allies. From the inside, the situation was far more complicated, and the complication started not with the music, but with the company each man kept. Here is where it starts getting genuinely wild, and to understand what happened between Kwani and Skrilla, you first have to understand the map of alliances that surrounded both of them. Because in Philly's drill scene, you are never just an individual. You are always a representation of the people you move with. And Skrilla, more than almost anyone else in that scene, was moving with everybody. On one side, Skrilla had built a close relationship with YBC Duel, one of the most electric and most controversial figures in Philly's rap underground at the time. Duel was not just a rapper. He was a known figure in the streets long before he picked up a microphone, and that background made his music carry a weight that fans could feel. His YBC crew, short for Youngboy Content, had developed a reputation for serious street activity, and people across the city were constantly talking about their moves and their stories. When Duel stepped fully into the spotlight, his pre-existing reputation turned his music into something almost mythological. Skrilla and Duel were tight, not just musically, personally. When producer and content creator Brandon Buckingham traveled to Philadelphia to interview Skrilla, Skrilla personally introduced him to Duel during the visit. That is a statement of closeness. That is not just a professional relationship, that is genuine day-one love. But here is the complication. At the exact same time that Skrilla was showing love to Duel in the YBC circle, he was also maintaining connections with CCK. Now, CCK is not just one crew, it is a coalition of multiple groups. The Clappers from 56th Street, the Campers, and the Clappers from 7th Street. All of these groups had serious, documented, and very public tension with YBC. This was not a distant or theoretical rivalry. This was active, ongoing, and had already been connected to real violence and real tragedy. The CCK-YBC tension had one particularly devastating flashpoint that set the tone for everything that followed. After a tragic incident involving the death of Duel's close friend DTI, a loss that hit the YBC circle deeply, Lil Bucks from CCK went straight to the studio and came out with a record called Lonely Child. The lyrics were direct and brutal, specifically addressing the people on the YBC side. Bucks rapped, "Andre Young Bull walked to the store but he ain't make it back. Your homie died, you ain't slide, you went to make a track. Fetty hide his thing in them boots, he tried to bust a track. My name always on that radar, on that dispatch." Those lines were not vague, they were named, aimed, and intentional. Now imagine being Skrilla at this moment. Your close friend Duel just lost someone. The man who put those lyrics out, Lil Bucks, is someone you are also affiliated with. Most people in that position would have been forced to pick a side right then and there. Skrilla did not. He dropped a song with Lil Bucks called Hood Hopper, where Bucks rapped, "I'm with Big Zoo with the Campers, CCK 0 to 4. He was still moving between both circles as if the walls between them did not exist. And if that was not complicated enough, things escalated further when Skrilla jumped on a track with Duel called McButtons and McNuggets Part 2. On that record, Duel went directly at Lil Bucks, Sonny, and Booga. Specific names, specific references. He rapped, "Son Nani and his brother Booger, when he hear we catch Nikas while they clocking out. Nika should have took a different route. Sonny in the jails, y'all shitty now. Yeah, I just put the banger on Bucks and made that Nia switch to a different jail." Those were not subtle shots. Those were declarations. And Skrilla was on that very record. But here's the part that really shook things up. Duel believed he was only recording that song with Skrilla. When they laid it down in the booth, it was just the two of them. But after the session was over, Skrilla reached back out to Lil Bucks and had him add a verse to the track, the same Lil Bucks that Duel had just finished sonically destroying on that very song. And Skrilla had actually asked Duel first whether Bucks could be added. Duel said no, explicitly. Do not put him on this. Skrilla went ahead and did it anyway. When Duel found out, he was furious, and rightfully so. Think about what that move actually communicated. Your close friend, whose crew you say you are aligned with, who just lost someone, who you are on record defending, and you go behind his back and add the opposition to the song he specifically said no to. The only reason their friendship survived that particular betrayal was because Skrilla was still actively helping push Duel's music to wider audiences at the time. The benefit of the alliance was still outweighing the damage of the disrespect, but the trust was fractured. That crack would not close. On top of all of that, Skrilla was also cool with Zoo Gang rappers like Poundside Pop, while at the same time maintaining a friendship with Hood Tally, one of Zoo Gang's most prominent rivals. Hood Tally had a close friend named Cha Lizzy, a figure people in Philly credited with playing a significant role in founding Zoo Gang in the first place. The tension between Hood Tally's circle and Zoo Gang had been building for a long time, and it reportedly reached a boiling point at a high school basketball game where members from both sides got into a full fight right there in the building. What started as punches turned into something far deeper. Cha Lizzy ended up arrested on a firearm charge following the incident. After Cha Lizzy was released, rumors started circulating that he was connected to the death of Poundside Pop's friend Sadi. That alleged connection pushed the rivalry to a point of no return. Poundside Pop and his allies fully committed to calling themselves Zoo Gang. Cha Lizzy responded with a track called No Lack, rapping, "When her Nayaka keep talking about bodies, I put the zoo on the map." The streets responded, and according to what people were saying around the city at the time, Cha Lizzy later lost his life as the conflict kept escalating. It was in this context, with bodies dropping, alliances fracturing, and the entire Philly underground in a state of controlled chaos, that OT7 Kwani dropped a track where listeners felt like he was directly referencing real events in his lyrics. He rapped, "Zoo O Andra, last thing played was Zoo name, Nicka got him stepped on. I know you remember, you can't forget it, cause you was next to him. I put that on guard, we catch a man and we gonna take it there." Said that his body had left the scene, but Naima, his face still there. The internet went into full forensic mode trying to decode exactly what those lines were referencing. The rivalry between Hood Tally's side and Zoo Gang had gotten so intense that even Meek Mill reportedly tried to step in and calm things down. Instead of helping, that move backfired and created new friction between Meek and Zoo Gang members. Skrilla, through all of this, kept making music with Hood Tally, kept being associated with multiple sides, and somehow, despite all the chaos surrounding them, in 2003, Skrilla and OT7 Kwani actually got in the studio together. They recorded a track. At that moment, Kwani did not appear to have a problem with Skrilla's complicated web of associations. The track never officially dropped, but the fact that it happened at all suggested that whatever tension was building between them was still being contained. Then came the interview, and the containment failed completely. Every massive beef has a trigger moment, a specific thing that took what was simmering and turned it into a full eruption. For Kwani and Skrilla, that trigger was an interview. Skrilla sat down and made a claim that would reshape the entire dynamic between these two men overnight. He said that he was the one who started the new wave of Philly drill music. Not that he contributed to it, not that he helped shape it, that he started it. He talked about linking with his producer, Mambo, who was based in Rome, and building this dark, eerie sound from the ground up. He described how once his music started circulating and gaining traction in Philly, other rappers in the city began gravitating toward that same sonic direction. The implication was clear. Without Skrilla, the sound that was now defining Philadelphia's entire drill movement would not exist in the form it did. Now here's why that particular claim hit different. OT7 Kwani had been working in the exact same sonic lane. His evolution toward dark, eerie, trap-influenced drill beats had been happening on a parallel timeline. His records from 2022, Dior Dior, and the records that followed carried the same atmospheric quality that Skrilla was now claiming to have pioneered. From Kwani's perspective, this was not just Skrilla overstating his influence. This was Skrilla effectively erasing Kwani from the history of the sound they had both helped build. The clip spread immediately. Fans took sides. Comment sections on both artists' posts turned into battlegrounds. The pro-Skrilla camp argued he had the receipts. Mambo's production timeline, the Cutthroat Project, the buzz that came before most people outside of Kensington knew who Kwani was. The pro-Kwani camp fired back that Kwani had been in that lane before Skrilla's underground buzz broke through to the broader city, and that the claim was a revisionist rewriting of history. Kwani did not let it marinate. He went directly to Instagram and called Skrilla out publicly. The call-out was direct and pointed. Skrilla responded by essentially laughing it off, treating the pushback like jealousy from someone intimidated by his growing reputation. Kwani came back harder and dropped the revelation about the unreleased collab. The reason that track never came out was because he had outperformed Skrilla on it so completely that releasing it would have been an embarrassment to Skrilla. He claimed he bodied him, left him on the track with nowhere to go. Whether that is accurate is impossible to verify with without hearing the record, and that record has still never surfaced publicly. But the timing and the specificity of the claim were designed to cut deep. You are not just questioning my sound, you are questioning my position. Let me remind you of the moment you were in the booth next to me and came up short. Kwani then tried to shift the framing of the beef by saying his real issue with Skrilla was not about music at all. He said the problem was the people Skrilla worked with, the associations, the affiliations, the circles he moved through. But fans immediately poked holes in that explanation. Skrilla had been moving between YBC, CCK, Zoo Gang, and Hood Tally's side long before he and Kwani ever recorded together. Kwani knew exactly who Skrilla was when they did that session. If the associations were the problem, why did they still get in the booth? The internet read the move as deflection, as Kwani trying to put the moral weight of the beef on Skrilla's character rather than acknowledging that it started because of a reputation claim that hit too close to home. Skrilla responded online again, and the tone shifted from competitive to something that felt more like a warning. Fans started saying this was no longer just a rap beef. The energy had moved into territory that people in Philadelphia recognized as genuinely dangerous. Both men had real roots and real streets. Both of them had people around them who were not just posting on social media. And then, in one of the strangest plot twists of this entire story, Kwani got on Instagram and announced the whole thing was fake drama. He said he and Skrilla had music coming out soon. Nobody believed it. Not a single person with a pulse in the Philly rap scene accepted that story. The internet called Cat immediately and relentlessly. But whatever actually happened between that call-out and that announcement, a phone call, a mutual connect stepping in, a real conversation between the two men, something changed the temperature. The public war went cold, but the underlying situation absolutely did not. Even after Kwani's "We're Good" post, the situation was far from resolved because Skrilla was not done talking. He appeared on No Jumper, one of the biggest rap interview platforms in the country, and sat across from Adam Tutu, and he went all the way in on Kwani. This interview is the moment that confirmed for anyone still on the fence that this beef was very real, very personal, and very much still alive regardless of what either man was saying publicly. Skrilla did not dance around it. He questioned Kwani's street credentials directly. He said he did not believe Kwani had the kind of background that people were attributing to him. He talked about his own history in Kensington, starting to hustle at 12, catching heroin-related charges, spending years under house arrest, surviving situations that the majority of people who talk hard in the rap game have never actually experienced. And he made it clear that he felt his own lived experience was operating on a fundamentally different level than Kwani's. Then he said the line that made the whole internet stop. He said he wanted to see Kwani face to face. He acknowledged with a slight laugh that he was not known as a fighter, but he still said he believed he could handle Kwani if they ever met in person. Read that back carefully. That is not trash talk. That is not rap beef posturing. In the context of two men from Philadelphia's most dangerous environments, with the circles and the history surrounding them, that is a direct challenge, and everyone in Philadelphia heard it that way. Think about the stakes of that moment. YBC Duel, Skrilla's close friend and one of the most prominent figures in this entire story, had already lost his life. DTI had lost his life. Sadi had lost his life. The circles around both Kwani and Skrilla were already deeply acquainted with fatal consequences. This was not an environment where you issued personal challenges and then shook hands afterward. The people watching this No Jumper interview on both sides understood exactly what the subtext was. Fans were convinced the rivalry was about to escalate into something irreversible. And then the violence came directly for Skrilla. He was shot while visiting Chicago. He survived. But the incident happened in the middle of the exact same window when the beef with Kwani was at its loudest, and it became part of the narrative surrounding everything. A reminder that for these men, the dangers they rapped about were never hypothetical. They were always immediate. After Duel's death, there was an additional layer of fuel thrown onto an already burning situation. Kwani made comments on Instagram about Duel that were widely perceived as deeply disrespectful, with DJ Academics and others noting that Kwani had apparently posted about the deceased rapper in a dismissive way, with some reports suggesting he questioned why Duel had dissed him in interviews, treating the death as a resolved grievance rather than a human loss. For Skrilla, who had been one of Duel's genuinely close friends, who had made music with him, put him in front of audiences, and called him his homie, that kind of response from Kwani was not something that could be easily forgotten or forgiven. It added a deeply personal dimension to what had started as a music industry argument about who created a sound. Kwani, for his part, was not unfamiliar with violence either. He had spoken publicly about surviving life in the Richard Allen projects and the near-death situations that came with it. He was not someone who needed to fabricate danger for credibility. But with the beef at its peak, the pressure from both sides, the internet, the streets, the people around each man, was at a level that made peaceful resolution feel nearly impossible. Then, in what became the most confusing chapter of the entire public beef, Skrilla came back on No Jumper for a second appearance and calmly said the situation with Kwani was over. No dramatic revelation, no detailed explanation, just "we are good." At some point during the interview, the conversation went something like this. Someone asked directly about Kwani, and Skrilla said something to the effect of, "Me and Kwani cool. That's that Naima." There was even some laughter about it. Asked if they had squashed it, Skrilla confirmed it and said it was good for the future of Philly, as if none of the past several months of public warfare had happened. In Philadelphia, truces carry their own complicated meaning. Sometimes they are genuine resolutions, two people sitting down, hashing it out, and deciding to move forward. Sometimes they are strategic calculations. The beef is costing too much and the bag is more important than the pride. Sometimes they are survival decisions. Someone in both circles put their foot down and said, "This ends now." From the outside, it is impossible to know which kind of truce this was, but publicly, for the first time in months, both men were no longer at war, and that had to count for something. With the beef publicly cooled, both artists returned their attention to their careers. But the paths they took from that point diverged so dramatically that looking at them side by side tells you a lot about the unpredictable nature of the music business, viral culture, and what it means to be hot in 2024 and 2025. For Kwani, April 2024 was supposed to be the launch pad. The 10K project signing was announced and immediately generated enormous buzz. This was not a small independent deal or a regional distribution arrangement. This was a major label machine with a proven track record of turning underground talent into national stars. The roster alone, Ice Spice at her absolute commercial peak, Trippie Redd as a multi-year certified star, told you that 10K knew how to develop artists and get them in front of mainstream audiences. The money was reportedly significant. The expectations from fans were enormous. It felt like Kwani was days away from. Weeks passed, months passed, barely anything new dropped. The energy that had been building around his name, which had been significant, real, and citywide before the deal was announced, started to dissipate in direct proportion to the silence. Fans started speculating openly. Was the label controlling his output? Were there creative differences? Was the transition from fully independent to major label infrastructure creating friction? Nobody got a clear public answer, and the absence of an explanation only made the disappointment louder. Then the streamer situation happened. A Philadelphia content creator named She Loves Raw, who had been one of Kwani's most vocal supporters, someone who gave him consistent shine on their platform, came forward with a story. According to Ra, they had paid Kwani $3,500 to participate in a stream collaboration. Kwani took the money and never followed through. The accusation spread fast online, and Kwani took a significant wave of criticism from fans who felt like he was mishandling the goodwill he had built up over years of authentic street-level work. For an artist who was already struggling to maintain momentum post-signing, that story landed at the worst possible time. He did put out his EP, The Biggest, in September 2004, and performed at Rolling Loud, California. Those were real achievements. Rolling Loud is not small, and any artist from the Philly underground getting on that stage in front of a national crowd is a genuine accomplishment. But relative to where the excitement had been, relative to what fans had been expecting after that 10K deal, the output felt underwhelming. The machine had momentum, and then it stopped. And in the streaming era, stopping is the most dangerous thing an artist can do. Skrilla's story went in the exact opposite direction, and the contrast is almost cinematic in how sharp it is. In September 2004, an anonymous TikTok account uploaded a snippet of a track. No announcement, no rollout, no promotional campaign. Just a song in the wild, with no context about who made it or why it was appearing. The song was Doot Doot 67, and the TikTok algorithm, that invisible and omnipotent machine that determines what 200 million American users see when they open their phones, decided this snippet was exactly what it wanted to push. By February 2025, the snippet had been used in over 126,000 TikTok videos. 126,000, that number is not just impressive, it is generational. Most songs that chart on Billboard never reach that kind of organic, bottom-up, user-generated penetration. Overnight, Skrilla was no longer Philadelphia's most interesting underground secret. He was a name that people in countries he had never visited were searching on Spotify and YouTube. He was already signed to Priority Records, a label with decades of hip-hop history and infrastructure, and had released his debut album Underworld in 2004. But Doot Doot turned him into something that no label deal alone could manufacture. He was a cultural moment, the kind that happens once every few years and reshapes who gets to be called important in the rap game. Suddenly, he was linking up with Lil Yachty, getting on tracks with G Herbo, traveling overseas for shows in countries that had never had reason to know a Philadelphia drill rapper's name before. He launched his first headlining tour in 2005, and it sold out. His follow-up project, Zombie Love Kensington Paradise, dropped in November 2024 and gave his expanding audience new material to dig into. In an interview with The Fader, he reflected on how his life had shifted. "I'm not actually out here running around shooting at nobody right now. He talked about how his music was evolving because the man making it had evolved. The sound still carried the weight and atmosphere of Kensington, but the ambitions behind it were now pointing somewhere much larger. His connection with Atlanta rapper Ola Runt also generated conversation online, another sign that Skrilla was actively building a network that stretched well beyond the Philly underground into the broader national rap ecosystem. For someone who had spent the first years of his career navigating the most complicated web of local alliances imaginable, the ability to now operate on a national and international level represented a form of freedom that most people from Kensington never get to experience. But Philadelphia never fully lets go. Even with all of that distance and all of that success, Skrilla's name kept circulating in conversations about the city's ongoing dramas. Because in Philly, reputation travels. It outlasts feuds, outlasts deals, outlasts whatever public statement you made last week. People in that city remember exactly who you moved with, who you crossed, and who you claimed. And Skrilla's history was too complicated and too interwoven with too many different circles for any amount of chart success to fully wash it clean. Now, let us bring this fully into the present. Because even with the truce, even with the careers moving forward, even with both men publicly claiming the situation is resolved, 2025 and early 2026 have continued to generate headlines around both of their names that make it clear this story is still being written. In August 2025, Skrilla was arrested during a music video shoot in Kensington. According to reports, he allegedly fired gel pellets from a toy gun at a Philadelphia police officer, striking the officer 3 times in the face, the neck, and the chest. The officer was not seriously injured, but the incident was serious enough to generate significant media coverage and law enforcement attention. The circumstances of the arrest are still being processed through the legal system, but the optics were not good. Here is a man who has just gone viral on a global scale, who is touring internationally, who has major label infrastructure behind him, and he is getting arrested during a video shoot in the same neighborhood he grew up in. There is a conversation in there about what it means to try to document the world you came from while trying to escape it at the same time. Skrilla has always been explicit about wanting his music to reflect Kensington authentically. But authenticity in that context carries real legal and physical risk. The line between documenting your environment and being consumed by it is not always easy to walk. And Skrilla has had to navigate that line more publicly than most artists his age ever have to. Then, in January 2026, Lil Bucks from CCK resurfaced. He was dealing with his own active legal situation involving a firearm charge, and from whatever legal limbo he was navigating, he still found the time to get on Instagram and call Skrilla out publicly. The specifics of what was said are still being discussed in online spaces, but the fact of the call-out itself is significant, because it reminds you that the web of alliances Skrilla has spent years navigating does not simply dissolve because his TikTok numbers went up. The history with CCK, with YBC, with all of those circles, it still exists. The people involved are still alive and still have opinions about how Skrilla moved through their world. Skrilla did not respond to Buck's call-out, and most fans read that silence as deliberate and strategic. His career has moved to a level where engaging with a local social media call-out, especially from someone dealing with active legal trouble, would be a step backward. He has audiences in countries that do not know what CCK is. He has tour dates in cities that have never heard of Kensington. Responding to Bucks would mean dragging all of that backward into a past that his career has been working to transcend. So he said nothing, and the internet interpreted that as the most powerful statement he could have made. Kwani, meanwhile, has kept a lower profile regarding the Skrilla situation specifically. His focus, publicly at least, is on rebuilding the momentum that stalled after the 10K signing. The people in Philly who rode for him in 22 and 23 have not disappeared. The genuine love for what he built in the underground has not evaporated. But love alone does not chart, music does. And as of early 2000-2006, fans are still waiting for the defining Kwani moment that converts underground loyalty into national recognition. It feels like it could come at any time, or it could keep getting delayed. That tension between the potential everyone sees and the output that has not matched it yet defines where Kwani is right now. The ghost of YBC Duel also continues to hang over this entire situation. Duel is gone, and the circumstances around his death, combined with how different people in this story responded to it, left wounds that have not fully healed. Skrilla lost a genuine friend. The YBC community lost one of their most visible members. And the comments that Kwani reportedly made in the aftermath, the dismissive, almost mocking tone that people describe from his Instagram posts, are not the kind of thing that gets forgiven in a community as tight-knit and memory-oriented as Philadelphia's drill scene. Even if the direct beef between Kwani and Skrilla is resolved on paper, the DNA of that conflict, the losses it referenced, the disrespect it involved, the people it touched, continues to circulate. Here is what gets lost when people reduce this to a simple rap beef narrative. The conflict between OT7 Kwani and Skrilla was never really just about music. It was about two men from two of the most unforgiving environments in Philadelphia fighting to define who they were, where they came from, and what their suffering was worth. Every rapper who comes out of a war zone faces the same fundamental tension. The streets that made you gave you everything that makes your music feel real. The authenticity, the pain, the paranoia, the grief. But those same streets will also try to take everything from you. And when you start to get successful, when the music starts generating real money and real attention, you become a target in ways that go beyond just rap beefing. You become a symbol, and symbols in that environment carry enormous weight. Skrilla's ability to move between circles, between YBC and CCK, between Zoo Gang and Hood Tally's side, was remarkable. Whether you see it as disloyalty or diplomacy depends entirely on your perspective. From a street politics standpoint, you could argue that he was being reckless, that he was disrespecting real alliances by acting like the lines between them did not exist. But from a human standpoint, you could also argue that Skrilla was doing something that required real intelligence and real social skill, maintaining relationships across divides that most people in that environment would never even attempt to cross. His mistake, ultimately, was thinking that skill would protect him from the moment someone with real pull decided to force him to pick a side. The who started the new wave claim was the public trigger, but it was almost incidental to the deeper forces at work. In Philadelphia's underground scene, the question of authenticity is not aesthetic, it is existential. When you make music that is explicitly about the violence and survival of your neighborhood, the credibility of that music is inseparable from whether people believe you actually lived it. Question the music, and you are questioning the person. Question the person, and you are potentially questioning their survival. That is why a conversation about musical influence escalated so quickly into personal challenges and street threats. The music and the life are the same thing in that world. You cannot separate them. What this beef also revealed is how precarious the position of any rising Philly drill artist is. Kwani had real momentum, real talent, and real backing, and one combination of a slow label rollout and a streamer controversy was enough to significantly damage his trajectory. Skrilla had real talent, real street knowledge, and real musical innovation. And one anonymous TikTok upload sent him to a completely different level. The difference between those two outcomes was not entirely about skill or hard work or deserving it. It was about timing, platform, and the unpredictable alchemy of viral culture. That is both the promise and the terror of making music in 2004 and 2025. And through all of it, the alliances, the betrayals, the diss records, the no-jumper interviews, the violence, the arrests, the viral moments, Philadelphia's drill scene kept producing some of the most raw, unfiltered, and powerful music in America. New names kept emerging. New stories kept developing. The city's capacity to generate authentic, dangerous, artistically serious music seems genuinely inexhaustible. And OT7 Kwani and Skrilla are permanently part of the history of that movement. Whether they ever reconcile, whether they ever drop that collab, or whether this story still has darker chapters ahead. So where do things actually stand right now in March 2026? Let us break it down plainly. OT7 Kwani is signed to 10K projects. He has major label infrastructure, a Philly fan base that has not given up on him, and a body of work that established him as one of the most authentic voices in his city's drill movement. The momentum slowed after the signing in a way that frustrated fans and generated real concern about whether the label environment was the right fit. The streamer situation added an unnecessary layer of reputational damage, but Kwani has been through worse. He came up from the Richard Allen projects. He survived the streets. He survived multiple run-ins with the law. He survived building a career from nothing in one of America's most dangerous neighborhoods. A slow rollout and some internet criticism is not going to erase what he built. The people who know what he is about still know. And if he drops the right record at the right moment, the conversation shifts back to him overnight. Philly never forgets a real one. Skrilla is, by almost any measurable standard, the hottest rapper Philadelphia has produced in years. His TikTok virality with Doot Doot crossed demographics, crossed international borders, and introduced his music to audiences that had no prior connection to Philly drill. He has a major label in Priority Records, a debut album in Underworld, a follow-up in Zombie Love Kensington Paradise, an international tour under his belt, and a growing roster of high-profile collaborators. He is building something real and building it fast. The challenge for him now is converting viral momentum into a sustained career, which is a different and in many ways harder task than getting viral in the first place. But the foundation is there, the direct beef between them publicly resolved. Whether that resolution is genuine, strategic, or simply a matter of both men being too busy with their careers to keep the fire burning, only they know. But the internet does not forget. And in Philly, history does not disappear. Every time something pops off in the drill scene, both their names get pulled back into the conversation. Every time a new call-out lands, people check the receipts of who moved with who and why. That is just the city. If they actually recorded that collab, finished it, and put it out, it would be one of the defining moments of Philadelphia drill's current era. Two men who went through public war, questioned each other's credibility, traded shots on the biggest interview platforms in rap, and came out the other side making music together. That is a story the culture would celebrate. It would be proof that the music can be bigger than the beef, that the art can outlast the conflict. Philadelphia has always needed that kind of story, and these two men are the ones who could tell it. But for right now, today, March 20, 2006, both men are moving forward. Both are building. And the city that made them, that shaped them, that gave their music its weight and its sorrow and its power, Philadelphia keeps going. The drill scene keeps evolving. New names keep emerging. New stories keep developing. And the beef between OT7 Kwani and Skrilla takes its place in the history of that movement as one of the most complicated, most layered, and most deeply human conflicts the city's rap scene has ever produced. This is what happens when two talented people from war zones try to build something beautiful out of survival. Sometimes they build together, sometimes they build against each other, and sometimes, if they are lucky enough and smart enough and alive long enough, they find a way to do both. OT7 Kwani, Skrilla, Philadelphia, one wave, one city, one story that is still being written. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know what time it is. Drop a comment and tell us, who do you think really started the new wave of Philly drill, Kwani or Skrilla? The debate is still live. Like the video, subscribe if you are new, and if you want more breakdowns on the stories that mainstream media does not touch, you are already in the right place. We will see you in the next.
Well-known Chicago area rapper was killed in a drive-by shooting early this morning in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood.
Now at 6, the brother of local rapper Lil Durk is dead after shooting at a club in Harvey this weekend. A police officer also injured.
6 men, 2 cars, 38 shots fired in 12 seconds. A rapper is standing outside a Dolce & Gabbana store shopping for his son's birthday present when 2 vehicles pull up, 4 gunmen jump out and unload on him in broad daylight in front of witnesses on camera in the middle of downtown Chicago's luxury shopping strip. Not on the South Side, not on 63rd Street, not in Parkway Gardens, on Oak Street, in the Gold Coast, in front of tourists, in front of cameras. FBG Duck gets hit 16 times. 16! And here's what's wild. By the time the feds started pulling apart what actually happened that day, they found out that the man who ordered that hit was already famous, already rich, already selling out shows, already on the Billboard 200. A man who grew up a few blocks from Duck, who rapped about the same streets, who had built his entire career off a war that he was still funding from his phone from Atlanta with diamond chains and cash payments. King Von, according to federal prosecutors, put a $50,000 bounty on FBG Duck's head and raised it to $100,000. He bought $128,000 worth of diamond-encrusted oblong pendants for his crew. He was moving like a CEO of violence, directing operations from the top while selling out arenas. And none of this started with rap beefs. None of it started with clout chasing. None of it started with Instagram. It started with a 15-year-old kid at a bus stop on 63rd and St. Lawrence. January 12, 2011. Shondell Gregory, known to everybody as Tuka, waiting for the westbound bus when a car pulls up and someone puts multiple bullets in him and leaves him dead in the street. That one death, one teenager, one January morning set off a chain of murders, retaliations, court cases, and federal indictments that would consume the next decade of Chicago's South Side. It would birth Oblock, it would birth Tukaville, it would fuel the careers of King Von, FBG Duck, Chief Keef, and Lil Durk, and it would end with 6 men sentenced to life in federal prison. In this video, we're going to walk through the entire war block by block, body by body, year by year. We're talking about Gakira Barnes, the 17-year-old girl who allegedly took out Odie Perry and turned herself into one of Chicago's most feared names before King Von allegedly stood over her and finished her. We're talking about how FBG Duck kept dissing Oblock for almost a decade, mocking their dead by name, making songs called Dead Bitches, while reportedly having a $100,000 bounty growing on his own head. We're talking about a federal RICO case so airtight that prosecutors played drill music in open court as evidence of a criminal enterprise. This is the full story, from the first body to the last gavel. Let's get into it. Before we get into the timeline, you need to understand what you're looking at geographically and politically. because this war makes no sense without knowing why these two gangs ended up on top of each other. The Gangster Disciples and the Black Disciples have been at war since the late 1950s. That's not a typo. These two organizations have been shooting at each other for longer than most of the people in this story have been alive. For decades, they operated in separate territories across Chicago's South Side, and as long as there was distance between them, the violence stayed manageable, brutal, but structured. Then the city started tearing down the housing projects. When Chicago demolished the high-rise projects that the Black Disciples had used as their base, including what's known as the Calumet Building, a 16-story complex that was basically a fortress for their operation, BD members who had nowhere to go got relocated, and a chunk of them ended up in Parkway Gardens, a sprawling apartment complex on 64th Street, the same 64th Street that had been Gangster Disciples territory for years. You now have two gangs that have been mortal enemies for over 4 decades, living within blocks of each other with no structure, no OGs holding things down, no leadership giving orders. Both organizations had been decimated by federal indictments in the early 2000s. Nobody was running anything anymore. It was just young guys, teenagers, with guns and a generational hatred and nothing to lose. That's the match. 63rd and St. Lawrence on one side, Gangster Disciples, what would become Tookaville, Parkway Gardens on the other side, Black Disciples, what would become our block. And then Tooka gets killed, and everything explodes. Let's go back to before January 2011. To understand why Tooka gets killed, you gotta understand what was already happening on those blocks. The STL/EBT set, operating out of 63rd and St. Lawrence, had already been in a shooting war with the Black Disciples faction. The back and forth had already claimed lives. According to what eventually came out in federal court documents, the STL side had killed a BD member named Edric T.Y. Walker back in 2009. T.Y. was one of theirs. And on the streets, that debt doesn't get forgiven. It gets repaid. Now enter Wooski, an STL member who reportedly escalated things further by killing a man named Reezy, described as an OG from the Week City faction. That killing was supposed to be a shorties beef, meaning the older guys weren't supposed to be involved. But when Reezy went down, the OGs of Week City said enough, and they got in the mix. Alliances started forming. The BDs and their allies were consolidating against STL/EBT. Revenge was in the air. By January 2011, it was only a matter of time before somebody paid for TY, and that somebody turned out to be Tooka. Shondell Gregory was 15 years old. He wasn't a rapper. He didn't have a social media following. He wasn't a general or a boss or a shot caller. He was a teenager from the neighborhood. His mother, Dominique Boyd, would say years later that her son had nothing to do with the rap industry. He couldn't even beatbox. He was a kid who happened to grow up in the wrong blocks at the wrong time, affiliated with the wrong set. And on January 12th, 2011, that affiliation cost him his life. It's a Wednesday morning. Tooka and two friends are standing at the bus stop on 63rd and St. Lawrence waiting for the westbound bus. A dark-colored vehicle pulls up. A passenger wearing a half mask jumps out, exchanges a few words with Tooka, draws a weapon, shoots him multiple times, gets back in the car, and pulls off. Tooka is pronounced dead at the scene. 15 years old. Law enforcement identified Tooka as a Gangster Disciples member, and the working theory, never officially charged, never officially resolved, was that this was retaliation for the death of T.Y. Walker. O.D. Perry, a 20-year-old Black Disciples member, was widely rumored on the streets to have been behind the trigger. No charges were ever filed. No one was ever convicted for killing Tooka. But the streets moved on the information they had. Tooka's people, the STL/EBT Gangster Disciples, renamed themselves Tookaville in his honor. His corner at 63rd and St. Lawrence became a shrine, a memorial, and an identity. And the men who believed O.D. Perry pulled that trigger started planning. Meanwhile, a teenager named Carlton Weekly was processing the loss of his close friend. Carlton, who would become FBG Duck, had grown up in Woodlawn on Chicago's South Side, moving to the neighborhood in 2008. When Tooka was killed in 2011, Duck affiliated formally with the STL/EBT Tookaville faction of the Gangster Disciples. He wasn't just grieving, he was choosing a side. And that choice would follow him for the rest of his life. Around the same time, Duck and his boys formed FBG, Flyboy Gang, a drill collective that would eventually be known also as Tooka Gang, named directly in honor of their fallen friend. 7 months after Tooka dies, the balance shifts. August 10th, 2011, O.D. Perry, 20 years old, Black Disciples, the alleged triggerman behind Tooka's death, decides to make a simple run to the store late at night. He gets on his bike, rides northbound. At 11:35 p.m., shots ring out. His friend watches from the store as Odie falls off his bike, gets back up, stumbles northbound, then takes approximately 10 more shots and goes down for good. The streets didn't need court documents to connect the dots. Tooka had just been killed 7 months prior, and now, allegedly on Tooka's birthday, Odie Perry was dead. That wasn't coincidence. That was a statement. It later came out in federal filings connected to the FBG Duck murder case that Gakira Barnes, a young woman affiliated with Tookaville, was alleged to have been the one who killed Odie Perry. Her own brother reportedly confirmed this to federal investigators, but we'll get to KI in a minute because her story deserves its own chapter. What matters right now is the aftermath of Odie's death. The Black Disciples on the west side of MLK Drive renamed their territory A Block in his honor. Just like the GDs had named their side Tookaville after Tooka, the BDs christened their block after their fallen soldier. 2 dead teenagers, 2 names, 2 sides that now had something personal to fight over every single day they woke up. Here's where it gets crazy, because now the war starts going viral before that was even really a thing. Chief Keef was 16 years old, under house arrest at his grandmother's house on the south side when he recorded his breakout material. He was affiliated with the Black Disciples Lamron set, and in tracks like 3 Huna and John Madden, he started referencing Tooka, not to mourn him but to disrespect him, calling him a smoking substance. Smoking on Tooka, like Tooka's death was something to celebrate, something to clown on. This was the moment the war jumped out of the south side and into the internet. People around the country started hearing the name Tooka and assuming it was just slang for weed, not understanding they were hearing the name of a real 15-year-old who had been shot dead at a bus stop. Tooka's mother would call this out years later, furious and heartbroken, saying, "Every song they make has got, we smoking on Tooka, Tooka this, Tooka that. You know how long my son has been gone? Since 2011? This is 2022 and he's still a trending topic." But that disrespect became fuel. On 63rd, every bar Keef spit about Tooka was a reminder of what O Block had done, and the Tookaville side was not about to stay quiet. You want to talk about someone who genuinely terrified both sides of this war? That's Gakira Barnes. Known on the streets as KI, she was, by virtually every account, the most active shooter in this entire conflict during the early years. From age 14 to 17, Barnes was a member of the St. Lawrence Boys, the Tookaville gangster disciples side. Law enforcement suspected her in 3 to 5 confirmed shootings, including at least 1 murder. On the streets, the number people talked about was far higher. There were people who said she had caught over 15 bodies by the time she was 17. She allegedly killed Odie Perry, the man A Block was named after. She was running around Southside Chicago doing things that grown men with reputations were scared to do, and she documented her whole life on Twitter. Over 27,000 tweets between 2011 and April 2014. Researchers from Columbia University actually used her Twitter archive as a case study on how social media was being used to accelerate gang violence. She was 5'3", 128 pounds, and had been described by people who knew her as shy in school. But on these streets and online, she was something else entirely. On April 11, 2014, Barnes tweeted a photo of herself on the porch of a house in Woodlawn. She was with friends. Normal. Hours later, she was shot 9 times on South Eberhard Avenue, just blocks from where she'd taken that photo. She died at 17 years old, the same age as Tooka had she lived 2 more years. The streets immediately started saying they knew who did it. This is one of the most significant and most explosive pieces of this entire story, and it didn't become fully public until Chicago Police Department documents were released through a Freedom of Information Act request years after the fact. Those documents stated plainly, the investigation revealed that the victim was killed by Davon Bennett. Davon Bennett, King Von. The same man who would go on to become one of Chicago's most celebrated drill rappers. The same man who was signed to Lil Durk's Only the Family. The same man who would eventually have a album debut at number 5 on the Billboard 200. According to prosecutors' 68-page federal filing, built for the FBG Duck murder trial, King Von stood over 17-year-old Gakira Barnes after shooting her and continued firing at close range. Barnes' own brother witnessed it and survived after being wounded himself. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office reviewed the investigation, agreed that Vaughn was positively identified as the killer, but declined to charge him because they didn't believe they could meet the burden of proof in court. No charges, no conviction. And if you listen to King Von's music, some people believe he basically confessed to it on a track called Wait, where he describes a confrontation with a female shooter in a way that lines up suspiciously close to what prosecutors say happened on Eberhart Avenue that day. Barnes's murder intensified everything. Her death meant Tuckerville had lost their most feared soldier, and it meant King Von had established himself at 19 or 20 years old as the most dangerous man in our block. That reputation wasn't just street credibility, it was going to become a rap career. Now here's where things shift into a different gear. Because up until now, this has been a story about teenagers with guns and a zip code most of America didn't know existed. But starting around 2017, something changes. The money gets real, the audience gets global, and somehow that makes the war worse. King Von had been in and out of the system for years. In July 2014, the same year K.I. died, he was charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder in connection with a separate shooting. He sat in Cook County Jail for over 3 years, going to trial in 2017. He was found not guilty in December 2017. The day he walked out of that courtroom, Lil Durk was waiting to sign him to Only the Family. Let that sink in. Von walks out of a murder acquittal and immediately starts recording music. And the music he makes is raw, vivid, specific. He raps about things that sound less like storytelling and more like testimony. Tracks like Crazy Story put listeners inside scenes of street violence with the kind of detail that only comes from being there. The authenticity was undeniable. By 2019, King Von was one of the hottest acts in Chicago. He had millions of streams, a growing national fan base, and an image built entirely around our block. The Black Disciples faction named after O.D. Perry. The man his side had been at war with Tuckerville over for almost a decade, and while his career was taking off, the war with 63rd was very much still active. On January 9th, 2019, King Von was featured on a remix of Exposing Me by fellow Chicago rapper Memo 600. The track had Von and Memo 600 trading bars about real-life feuds with neighborhood rivals. It wasn't abstract. It was specific, detailed, clearly aimed at people on the other side who would hear it and recognize their situations being described. Tuckerville didn't let it go unanswered. FBG, Duck, and Ruga dropped their own remix of the same song on February 4th, 2019. 2 sides, same beat, going directly at each other's dead and living. This wasn't entertainment. This was a war being fought through microphones in addition to firearms. FBG Duck, for his part, had been dissing our block since the beginning. His track, I'm from 63rd, was a declaration of identity and defiance. He released Chicago Legends in 2019, which paid tribute to fallen Chicago artists, but he also made clear which side he was on and which people he respected and which ones he didn't. And then Duck released Dead Bitches on July 10th, 2020, less than 4 weeks before he was killed. Prosecutors in the FBG Duck murder trial specifically highlighted Dead Bitches as one of the central provocations that pushed our block members to move on Duck. The track directly targeted and mocked dead members of the Our Block faction. Charles C. Murda Liggins' brother was among those referenced. This wasn't subliminal. This wasn't metaphorical. This was Duck naming people and mocking their deaths by name publicly for millions of listeners to hear. From O-Block's perspective, from a gang that had already reportedly placed a bounty on Duck's head, this was the last straw. In court, prosecutors made the case that Dead Bitches was what moved the timeline up. Duck had been circling a target for years. After that song dropped, the clock was running out. Meanwhile, as his career grew, Von wasn't just spending money on jewelry and videos. According to federal prosecutors, he was investing in the war. King Von paid $128,000 to an Atlanta jewelry store for diamond-encrusted Our-Block pendants. He kept the biggest one for himself and distributed the others to his associates. Most were bought before Duck was killed, some afterward. Prosecutors later used these pendant purchases as direct evidence linking Von to the individuals charged in Duck's murder. Proof that he was the financial backbone of the Our-Block criminal enterprise, not just a rapper who rapped about it. An FBI affidavit noted that Von had discussed the pendants on YouTube, naming specific crew members, Muwop C. Murda, by their street names while talking about the jewelry designs. That affidavit became a roadmap for federal investigators trying to establish who was in Von's crew and what their relationships were. And according to a confidential informant who spoke to Chicago police detectives and FBI agents, King Von put a $50,000 bounty on FBG Duck's head, then raised it to $100,000. The name of the specific person said to have placed the bounty was redacted in court documents, but the description of that person matched Von precisely. Someone who had bought custom necklaces for members of the Black Disciples A-Block faction. There was only one person that description fit. FBG Duck was worth $100,000 dead, and on the south side of Chicago, that kind of money moves people. Let's walk through this day hour by hour because the detail of what went down on Oak Street is something that still doesn't make complete sense until you understand the full mechanics of it. It's a Tuesday afternoon in Chicago. The Gold Coast is packed. It's summer, it's warm, it's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. East Oak Street is lined with designer boutiques, Dolce & Gabbana, Moncler, Milani. People are shopping, tourists are walking around, there are cameras everywhere. Carlton Weekly, FBG Duck, was downtown with his girlfriend. They were shopping for his son's birthday present. By every account, this was a regular errand. Domestic, normal. He was a father buying a gift for his child. But Duck had been careful for a reason. Court documents note that a friend of Duck's said he had been leery of letting people know his whereabouts because he had received death threats from opposing gang members in the drill rap scene. He was aware of the target on his back. He just didn't know how close the crosshairs were on this particular Tuesday. At some point before 4 p.m., Ralph T.Z. Turpin, an A-Block associate, happened to be on Oak Street, and he spotted Duck. Turpin walked into the Milani boutique on Oak Street, saw Duck inside, and immediately got on his phone. He was clocking Duck's location in real time, reporting back to A-Block. Surveillance footage from a nearby Moncler store picked up someone on a cell phone saying he saw Duck less than 30 minutes before the shooting. Someone who then walked into the store and appeared to be tracking him while another person with a gun was apparently trying to close in. The call goes out. Come downtown. Now. From Parkway Gardens. From A-Block. A group of men get in cars and make their way to the Gold Coast. This is not a spontaneous thing. This is not a moment of passion. From the south side to Oak Street, they are driving specifically to kill Carlton Weekly in broad daylight in front of everybody. 4:26 p.m. Two vehicles pull up on Oak Street, a silver Chrysler 300, a black Ford Fusion. Both cars have been identified and linked to the defendants. 4 gunmen get out. The shooting lasts approximately 12 seconds. In 12 seconds, 38 rounds are fired. Duck is struck 16 times. His girlfriend standing nearby is also hit. A 36-year-old bystander waiting in line is struck in the back and leg. Duck collapses on the sidewalk outside the Dolce & Gabbana store. The gunmen get back in the cars and drive off. Surveillance cameras capture everything. Carlton Weekly, FBG Duck, is rushed to a hospital and pronounced dead. He was 26 years old. He was shopping for his son. At 5:20 p.m., less than an hour after the shooting, Kenny Mac Robertson sends a text to someone. He includes a link to a news article about FBG Duck's killing. And in that text, according to federal prosecutors, Robertson tells the recipient that King Von had put out a hit on FBG Duck, and that was one of the reasons he had participated in the shooting. Think about that. The man is texting about the murder he just committed, name-dropping the man who ordered it, within 60 minutes of the body hitting the ground. That text message became one of the most damning pieces of evidence in the entire federal case. On the streets, the reaction from A-Block was immediate. Social media posts, celebrations, people posting about Duck being killed with the kind of pride that makes prosecutors' jobs easier. Because every post, every text, every YouTube video became potential evidence. The gang had spent years using social media and music to broadcast their criminal enterprise. Now the feds were going to use all of it against them. 3 months later, November 6, 2020, King Von is in Atlanta. His debut album, Welcome to O-Block, dropped just 1 week earlier, named directly after the faction he'd been fighting for and funding his entire adult life. The album debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200. He's at the top of his career. At around 2:15 a.m., Von and his crew are outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta when they get into an altercation with rapper Quando Rondo's entourage. Words get exchanged. Then somebody pulls out. Gunfire erupts in the parking lot outside the lounge. King Von is shot multiple times. He's transported to a hospital in critical condition. He doesn't make it. Davon Bennett, King Von, dies that morning. He's 26 years old, same age as FBG Duck when Duck died 3 months earlier. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation reported 2 people killed and 6 wounded in the shooting. A 22-year-old named Timothy Lil Tim Leaks, a rapper affiliated with Quando Rondo, was placed in police custody for Bennett's murder. Charges against Leaks were ultimately dropped in August 2023 under Georgia's Stand Your Ground law. Von's death sent shockwaves through Chicago and through the rap world. Welcome to O Block, the album he made celebrating Parkway Gardens and the faction that carried FBG Duck's blood on their hands, was his final work. It went top 5. He never saw the reaction. And now, with both Von and Duck dead within 3 months of each other, the feds were already moving. They had been building something for months, and in October 2021, it landed. The morning of October 13th, 2021, federal agents descended on Parkway Gardens, on O Block, where King Von grew up, where the Black Disciples had been running their operation for years, and they came with indictments. 5 men charged with committing murder in aid of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and federal firearm offenses. Every charge carries a mandatory minimum of life in federal prison. Prosecutors made clear from day one that they were also pushing for the possibility of the death penalty. The 5 original defendants, Charles C. Murda Liggins, 30 years old at the time of indictment, one of the primary shooters, identified via surveillance footage and witness testimony as having fired multiple rounds at Duck. His brother had been one of the people Duck mocked by name in Dead Bitches, Kenneth Kenny Mac Robertson, 28. The man who sent the text message after the shooting linking Von to the hit, identified from vehicles registered in his name at the scene. To Carlos Los Offord, 30, charged as one of the participants who rushed downtown from Parkway Gardens when Turpin spotted Duck. Christopher C. Thang Thomas, 22 at the time of charges, one of the gunmen who emerged from the vehicles on Oak Street. Marcus Muop Smart, 22. Named by King Von himself in the YouTube jewelry discussion. One of the people Von had bought an O Block pendant for, a gunman in the attack. He also appeared to rap about the killing in a song posted to Instagram nearly a year later, with lyrics that referenced someone from 63rd who couldn't get back up. A 7th suspect, Ezel Zel Munna Rawls, reportedly also participated in the shooting. He died by suicide on August 24, 2021. Just weeks before the indictments came down. In April 2023, the government unsealed a superseding indictment adding a 6th defendant, Ralph Teasy Turpin, 33. He was the man who spotted Duck on Oak Street, called it in, and summoned the shooters. Without Turpin's eyes on Duck that day, the shooting doesn't happen when it does. He was charged with 1 count of murder in aid of racketeering and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering. The evidence the government assembled was staggering. Surveillance footage from multiple cameras on Oak Street capturing the vehicles, the gunmen, their movements before and after the shooting. Ballistic evidence recovered at the scene linked to 5 other separate shootings where 1 person was killed and 5 were wounded. Cell phone data, texts, social media posts, but the most unusual evidence, the evidence that made this trial unlike almost any other, was the music. Prosecutors played drill rap songs in open court. They played Dead Bitches. They played Von's songs. They played Muop's Instagram clip. They played Exposing Me. They argued that these songs were not entertainment. They were documentation of a criminal enterprise, a gang that used social media and music to broadcast their violence, recruit members, intimidate rivals, and establish hierarchy. The songs weren't just evidence of motive, they were evidence of the enterprise itself. The defense pushed back hard. Mark Barnett, one of the roughly dozen defense attorneys in the case, argued that drill rap is strictly for entertainment and that using lyrics as evidence criminalized an art form rooted in Black experience on Chicago's South Side. It was a legitimate argument, one that courts across the country have wrestled with. But in this courtroom, with this evidence, against this backdrop of documented gang activity, the jury wasn't buying it. Among the most explosive testimony in the trial came from Rakeem FBG Buta Wilton, a friend of Duck's, a fellow Tucaville affiliate, and someone who had a very specific reason to know about King Von's involvement in this war. Buta took the stand and confirmed something he had publicly denied for years. King Von had killed his sister, stood over her, shot her multiple times. He had previously told people publicly that Von hadn't killed her, and on the stand, he explained exactly why. As long as Von was walking this earth, Buta told the court, I never mentioned the man's name on no police. He changed his story after Von was killed in Atlanta in November 2020, With Vaughn dead, the no-snitch code became less of a life or death calculation, and Buddha's testimony connected directly to the K.I. killing, establishing the chain of violence that prosecutors were presenting as a continuous criminal enterprise. O.D. Perry, K.I. Barnes, and ultimately F.B.G. Duck, all connected by the same war, the same factions, the same hatred. The trial also became a spectacle because of two YouTube bloggers, Martell Trench's News, Wiley, and F.B.G. Buddha, who had deep knowledge of the gang world and were called to testify. Both had built massive YouTube audiences covering Chicago street news and gang activity. Both proved mercurial on the stand, alternating between outbursts, evasive answers, and what courtroom observers described as near-comedic exchanges with defense attorneys. But through the chaos, they provided essential insight into the world prosecutors were trying to explain to a federal jury. They knew these people, they knew these streets, they knew the significance of every name, every neighborhood, every track that got played in that courtroom. Meanwhile, the trial itself was drawing a global audience. Every day's proceedings were being recapped on YouTube by channels with millions of subscribers. People in London, in Nigeria, and Brazil were following the F.B.G. Duck murder trial the way people follow a high-profile celebrity case. The intersection of drill music, gang violence, and federal prosecution had created something that transcended Chicago, and the rap blogosphere was covering it in real time. Even before the criminal verdicts came in, the civil side of this story was blowing up. Duck's mother, Lashina Weekly, filed a 92-count civil lawsuit in Cook County Circuit Court naming Lil Durk, King Von's estate, Only the Family, and several major record labels, including Sony Music, Universal Music Group, and Empire Distribution, as defendants. The suit alleged civil conspiracy, wrongful death, negligence, battery, assault, and emotional distress. It accused OTF of operating as a criminal enterprise that orchestrated a campaign of violence to eliminate rivals and control Chicago's drill rap scene. It accused the major labels of promoting and profiting from violent behavior, essentially arguing that the labels knew what they were investing in and kept the money flowing anyway. It has been a long and painful journey fighting for justice for my son, Lashina Weekly said in a statement. Not a day goes by that I don't think about him and the life that was taken from him. The lawsuit named D-Thang, Dante Banks Jr., Lil Durk's older brother, as a central figure in facilitating the shooting. Court documents in the criminal case noted that Robertson had tried to reach D-Thang in the moments before Duck was killed, and that a phone number associated with D-Thang was active during the period when Turpin was calling the shots downtown. D-Thang was himself killed outside a Harvey strip club in June 2021, a shooting that also wounded a police officer. Lil Durk denied involvement. His attorneys disputed the allegations, but the shadow over him in connection to this case, the suggestion that OTF's leadership had knowingly directed or enabled the violence, was something that courtroom testimony kept circling back to, even if charges were never formally brought against him. January 17, 2024, after a 3-month trial that was repeatedly delayed, marked by extraordinary testimony and watched by millions of people around the world, a federal jury came back with its verdicts. All 6 defendants found guilty, every single one. Charles Liggins, guilty. Kenneth Robertson, guilty. TaCarlos Offord, guilty. Christopher Thomas, guilty. Marcus Smart, guilty. Ralph Turpin, guilty. The jury found that all 6 men participated in a criminal organization, the Oblock Street Gang, that engaged in violence to protect its perceived territories on the south side of Chicago. The jury found that they conspired to murder Carlton Weekly, specifically to maintain and increase their positions within the gang. The mandatory sentence for murder in aid of racketeering under federal law, life in prison, no parole, no possibility of release. Every man who helped plan, coordinate, travel to, carry out, or report on the murder of F.B.G. Duck on August 4, 2020 is going to die in federal prison. Duck's mother and family members broke down in tears in the courtroom as the verdicts were read. The judge set sentencings for August 6, 2024. Assistant U.S. Attorney Anne Marie Ursini, who delivered the government's closing arguments, had put it simply in her summation. They each played a part in his murder. Some were shooters, some were drivers, and Ralph Turpin provided Carlton Weekly's location. They hunted Carlton Weekly down and they brutally executed him in the street when he was out shopping for his son. Back from all of this for a second, because when you lay the entire timeline out, from Tuka getting killed at a bus stop in January 2011 to 6 men getting life sentences in January 2024, you're looking at 13 years of consecutive tragedy. 13 years of funerals, of prison sentences, of mothers burying children, of neighborhoods that never got to be anything but a battleground. What does this war actually represent? This war did something that no one fully anticipated when Chief Keef was recording 3 Huna under house arrest in 2012. It turned real gang violence into internationally consumed entertainment. The beefs, the diss tracks, the social media beef, all of it fed a global audience that had no skin in the game. People around the world were streaming songs that were literally documenting active murder conspiracies. They were watching YouTube documentaries about people who were still living and dying in real time. King Von's career is maybe the most striking example of this. He rapped about things he had actually done. He named real people. He described real situations, and tens of millions of people loved him for it. Because the storytelling was undeniably compelling, because the emotion was real, because the music was genuinely great. Crazy Story is a remarkable piece of art by any measure, but behind it was a man who, according to federal prosecutors, was simultaneously funding murders with diamond jewelry money. The FBG Duck murder trial became the moment the legal system fully caught up to what drill music had been doing for a decade. Prosecutors didn't just use lyrics as a backdrop, they used them as evidence of the criminal enterprise itself. They argued, and a jury agreed, that the music and the violence were not two separate things. They were the same operation expressed through different mediums. That has massive implications for Chicago drill, for rap music more broadly, and for how courts treat artistic expression going forward. The argument that it's just rap, it's just entertainment did not hold up in federal court when there were also text messages, surveillance footage, cell phone data, and a cooperating informant confirming what the lyrics were describing. Here's the thing, a plan, that policy decision made by politicians in offices nowhere near 63rd Street or Parkway Gardens created the geographic conditions for this war. When you force two groups with decades of hatred into the same space and remove the organizational structure that had kept violence somewhat structured, you get chaos. You get teenagers with guns and no OGs to stop them. The war between O'Block and Tocqueville wasn't inevitable. It was created by the collision of federal gang prosecutions, failed housing policy, and a city that never had a real plan for what happened when the projects came down. Tuka didn't have to die. Odie Perry didn't have to die. Gakira Barnes, who started carrying a gun at 14, should have been in school somewhere getting the education her middle school principal said she was capable of. None of them got what they should have gotten, and the cycle kept feeding itself. Tuka's mother, Dominique Boyd, spent years watching her son's name become a punchline, a meme, a brand. Tuka Pack printed on shirts, referenced in songs by artists who had never met her son and didn't know his real name. She finally went public in 2022, 11 years after his death, to beg rappers to stop. Not just for Tuka, but for all the dead whose names were being used as ammunition in beefs they were no longer alive to be part of. "What has my son done to y'all to make y'all disrespect him like this?" she asked. "He did not even know how to beatbox. He can't be here and be his voice, so I'm gonna do it for him." FBG Duck's mother spent years fighting, first for justice, then for meaning. She watched her son's death become a federal case, a media spectacle, a cultural moment. She filed civil suits against record labels. She pushed back against Lil Durk in the press. She attended a public memorial on Oak Street in August 2021, 1 year after her son was killed in that spot, and urged the community to reject retaliatory violence. Gakira Barnes' mother watched her daughter's life get turned into documentaries and academic studies and true crime content. The gap-toothed girl in the graduation gown next to the YouTube clips of her waving a gun. A A&E series called Secret Life of a Gang Girl premiered about her daughter's life in 2019. The world was fascinated by K.I. as a character. Her mother had to live with what K.I. actually was, a child who fell into violence so deep at such a young age that nobody could pull her out before it killed her. King Von's legacy. In August 2021, a mural of King Von was painted on a large wall overlooking Martin Luther King Drive in Parkway Gardens, the complex where he was raised, the complex that became O'Block, the complex that federal prosecutors called a criminal enterprise. The mural depicted him wearing a backward cap and an O'Block chain. It was commissioned as an art project, part of a mural movement. Some Chicago residents were furious. They argued the mural glorified gang violence and would attract crime to the area. Others felt it honored a real person who came from a real place and made real art about his real life. During the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards, King Von was included in the In Memoriam segment. So was FBG Duck. Two men from the same zip code, from opposite sides of the same war, both dead at 26, both remembered on the Grammy stage. That's what this war produced. Two of Chicago's most authentic voices, gone. 6 of the men responsible, in federal prison for life. A generation of South Side Chicago youth who watched all of this unfold in real time on social media, through music, and learned whatever lessons the streets decided to teach them from it. Tuka never got to be famous. He was 15 and he was waiting for a bus. Odie Perry never got to be old. He was 20 and he was going to the store. K.I. Barnes never got to be anything other than a cautionary tale and a case study. Duck was shopping for his son's birthday present. Vaughn dropped his debut album 7 days before he died. 13 years, countless dead, 6 life sentences, 2 gang names that meant everything to the people who claimed them and nothing to anyone who had to bury somebody over them. That's the war between A Block and 63rd. No cap. If you made it this far, drop a comment. Where do you think the real blame lies in all of this? Is it the gangs, the city, the labels, the system that created the conditions in the first place? Let us know. Like the video if you want more deep dives like this. Subscribe if you're new. We'll see you on the next one.